Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Henry Confidential and Austin Pez Howell. Austin, we've been building this one up for a little bit, and the time is here to rank Stanley Kubrick. What are your thoughts?
No, I remember when we were first kind of starting the show, and we were, we were getting a couple of the obvious ones we wanted to get out there quick. Your Nolan, your Tarantino, all that kind of stuff. And behind the scenes after one of the show, you're just like, "How are you on your Kubrick, bro?" And I was like, "Well, like I've seen most of the movies. I had a few blind spots, as we'll talk about. I had three first time watches on this one, and I was like, well, I'm pretty confident on my top ones that even if I rewatch it, I'm there. But yeah, I'd be willing to pull the trigger and finish it off and give a bunch of them a good watching, give it a definitive ranking. So this is one we've been building up to for a while, and we'll see. It's a hell of a filmography, that's for sure. And I was telling you, before we went live that. He's probably up there with Tarantino as far as like all-time banger, 5-star kind of movies. So yeah, like we'll see as far as where we each individually rank them. But I will say, he's batting a pretty high percentage for me, like especially after this all these rewatches I did this week.
I think the reason that like someone like you who is obviously a fan of Kubrick officially, whether it's a new fan or an old-time fan, but even if you never realize it, it's because of, if you look at his filmography, it's so diverse. Like there's not really more than one Stanley Kubrick movie in terms of like genre that's really the same. Like even the 2 war movies he has are completely different.
Are completely different war movies. Completely different war movies.
Well, technically even 3 if you really think about it, like 3 different types of war movies. So it's like he's a director that he just is so broad and vast in like what he's able to cover. And it's like, I don't know if that's like who he was as a person or just how his mind works. Is a lot of people like talked about him as kind of like this out there like genius type, and he definitely was so in particular with how many takes he wanted to take and just how he really got into the minds of his crew and his actors. And like obviously they, the big one is The Shining, about how they talk about that. And it's one of those ones where it's like it's like when we lost him, like obviously he started AI and then that got passed over to Spielberg. And it's one of those ones like that movie, like his technically what would have been his, final movie at that point is nothing like even what he's got now. You know what I mean? So it's like even leading up to like everything is just so different. And that's what makes it so cool, because you could do a marathon of Kubrick movies, a double feature, a triple feature, a week feature, like some people like you maybe just did recently. Repetitive, and it's
it's everything was a different experience, a different themes, like different commentary on aspects of life and death and paranoia and whatever, like there's all kinds of stuff that he goes into. And we'll talk about some of my like I said, I had 3 movies that were complete first time watches for this one that I just when I was going over the thing, I was like, okay, I had 3 to go as far as fresh ones, but I had seen most of his filmography. I mean, I had seen 8 out of the 11 that we're going to talk about before, and had pretty strong opinions about any of them. But I will say one of them also I just came to just blind like 6 months ago before we were even doing a show, and I just watched just on a whim for a whole nother topic, but ended up loving that one too. But yeah, it's something. I'm glad I rewatched some of them. One of them, was in negative territory, and now it's kind of sliding into positive territory too. So it's we'll talk about it. But there's some things, and I could almost say you could pull any fan of Stanley Kubrick off the streets and tell him to rank the movies, and you might get a different ranking for every single Kubrick fan too, as far as like what they consider like his best work. So it's definitely one of those things like a Tarantino where you could get a different answer from almost any film fan.
And like you kind of hinted at earlier, like the commentary, like my thing about Kubrick, why it always hits home for me, it's like he's able to tackle tough commentary but not seem biased. Like it's not like he's completely wide open with it. Like he's like a 60-40 where it's like clearly he's leaning towards one way, but he still shows a narrative where the other side is at least representative, so it doesn't feel completely biased, and so you can go in almost the entire feature with an open mind and not feel preached at, but still learn something or still
Right.
end at the finish line where he wants you to go. But you're sprinting. You know what I mean? You're going forward. It doesn't feel like you're being attacked at it. You know what I mean? So it's like it's more like one of those where it's not very daunting, even though some of the run times can be up there. And we'll talk about that, especially when it comes into the ranking. I feel like run times might play a factor. But you ready to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, man. Ready when you are. I think this will be a good topic, man. It'd be a good discussion.
All right, so
Let's get into it.
I'm gonna start off by saying that we did not include Killer's Kiss just because it's not a completely full feature. It's more of a added on thing where it's like we were talking behind the scenes. It's like it's literally just an added bonus free feature on the Killing Criterion. Like, hey, by the way, go watch at least my other movie. Like,
yeah, right.
It kind of has to be a gift to watch it. So, like, obviously, I recommend it just from a film fan perspective, but like it would be my technical number 12. So I want to throw that out there that it's not great, but it's one of those like it's equivalent to like Following for Nolan, where it's like it's better than it should be, but it's honestly not good, and that's just where it lies. So
or like Pi for Aaron Aronofsky. Exactly. Those ones we've talked about that are like you can see things here and there. You can see where he was playing around with concepts.
Tricks, and you see the you see the director behind it. Like you still know it's a Kubrick film. So with that said, my number 11 is my prediction of what your number 11 would be, and at this point, similar to why it's my prediction for you, it's just not my bag in terms of interest. The length is daunting, and it's just not as fun as some of the other ones, even though some of the other ones have tackling some hard topics. But Barry Lyndon is my number 11.
Bingo, we match. So let's just get it out of the way. Because no surprise there.
Yeah, so the reason that this one is my number 11 is just because like I don't dislike period pieces by any stretch of imagination. Like he has another period piece that we're going to talk about that's actually a few spots higher. So it's not like it's one of those things where I'm against this genre, and I like movies like The Favorite or Phantom Thread that we talked about, where it's not, it's where it depending on how it's done, it can be interesting. This one is just, I don't know, it's just like for some reason in my mind when I think of Barry Lyndon, I like for some reason also think of like Amadeus, and when I think of Amadeus, I'm like way up here, and when I think of this one, I'm just like, oh yeah, Barry Lyndon. You know what I mean? It's just like there's a few scenes like Cinefix has this one episode of when they talk about like the shot composition of just like sexual tension, and it's like when the scene when they're in the room and they're playing cards, and it's like the lighting is just so beautiful, and it's like there's a lot of natural lighting and it looks really good. So it's like there's elements that you can love and appreciate as a film fan, but in terms of the grand scope of the 3-hour epic, it just isn't quite there for me. So yeah, like the acting's fine, it looks good, and I don't hate myself when I watch it. I just am not going to rush out to see it, and I'm by the end of it I'm like, okay. What about you?
Yeah. No, this was one of my first time watches, and I was not terribly excited going into it, but I still wanted to give it a chance. And oddly enough, Henry, I'll say the first hour of the movie I was somewhat into. I was giving it the first hour because the first hour of the movie I was rolling, and it wasn't like the greatest thing ever, but I was still with it. As far as it was just exploring this dude who's kind of rebellious. He kind of doesn't know his place in life or what he wants to do, or he thinks he doesn't like fit in, and he's he's quarreling with that one guy, and he has the duel with him and stuff, and then he's kind of floundering as far as like he gets robbed, so he's got to go into the army to kind of just live. And and all that stuff, and he's starting fights in the army with dudes, but he's also like getting promoted here and there, like, and then he defects to another thing. Like I was into all that because I was just like, oh, it kind of feels like almost like a Forrest Gump type thing where it's going from like just following this dude in his life, going from like weird life scenario to weird life scenario. So I was actually kind of surprisingly with it for like an hour or so. I wasn't hating it, and then like when it turns into, I called it Nobleberry when he goes into like the noble life, I was like, okay, I don't want to watch this shit anymore. Yeah. Like I was completely uninterested when it was like him fitting into high society and like, or powder face Barry, whatever you want to call it, when he goes into that phase of his life.
Stopped being the wanderer and the war.
Yeah, and he settled in. I was just like, eh. Yeah, I was not as into that. And, again, like you said, it's very interesting. Like the movie looks great. Like I appreciate that he didn't use artificial lighting for the movie to try to get that natural setting, as if they were filming something in that period, sort of a thing. And yeah, a lot of the the scenes look great. I will say, a lot of these British they had horrible war strategy. Did you notice that when they're doing some of these battles, just straight marching towards an enemy while getting mowed down by musket fire, like, and not trying to
it's
avoid anything? Like, it
hey,
was infuriating. It
let's
was
just battle in
infuriating.
numbers. Like,
yeah. Oh, we have 4 times as many people as you, so if we lose a third of them, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm like, yeah, it does matter. Like, you're still just losing people. I don't know, just that one infuriated me. I was like, why are you just why aren't you at least running? At least you could cut your your time in half trying to get to them. It was infuriating. I just little things I was watching. I was like yelling at the screen, like, what are you doing? Like, old time war strategy is weird. But yeah, like, I didn't like hate every bit of it. Again, like, the first third I was okay with, and I had hope for it going along. But man, when it settled into like him trying to do the high society thing, like, I'm not into that type of stuff. Like, that stuff kind of bores me. So yeah, it ended up just being, in last place, and it's my only one I'm kind of overall negative on. I'll say it's all uphill from here, Henry. So that's at least a good thing. I mean, I'm getting the one out of the way, and it's all uphill from there.
Even for me, like, I'm not even negative on it. It's a 3-star movie for me just because I do appreciate the filmmaking and the acting. And, like, oddly enough, for being 3 hours long, it's really not that poorly paced. Like, you can tell that Kubrick's a great director, that he's able to, like, move along. Like, there are some that like linger, like that one scene, but like the one I just talked about, the Cinefix one that they highlighted. But even the lingering on that, like, you can appreciate the art that's going in it. So at least when it's lingering, you're at least, kind of fascinated on what we're lingering on, instead of it just kind of being like, for example, in The Hateful Eight at the very beginning, where it's just the scope, the scenery that has nothing to do with the movie by the end of it, and it's just 5 minutes of that. You know what I mean? Where that at that point, that's just unnecessary stuff. So it's not a rewatchable movie, but like, you don't completely hate yourself for the entire 3 hours. So I feel like that, that's better than most for these types of movies. I actually am curious on your number 10, so I'll let you go next.
Yeah, my number 10 is Doctor Strangelove. So, and I know that'll hurt some people's hearts, but here's the positive aspect of it. I used to be all negative on this movie. And I know we were talking behind the scenes. Like, I've given this movie in the past, and I had seen it before, like 3 or 4 chances. And I thought this movie was always going to be sort of in Blade Runner territory for me, where I never thought it was ever going to click, and like really turn that corner for me. So I was actually listening to most of it throughout 2 of my work shifts this week. I was just kind of listening to it at work to maybe see, like, maybe if I just hone in on the dialogue and like just listen to, like, the performance aspect of it, not even visually, to click in. And I will say that, like, there's a point in the movie, probably 35 or 40 minutes in, where it starts to get into more positive territory for me. The only thing that keeps it still held back in sort of a number 10 position is it takes like forever to get going for me. Like, that first 30 minutes for me is kind of excruciating, like, as far as the pacing, like, as far as to really get to the silly stuff. But I will say, once it really gets to the silly stuff, where it kind of starts is once we get to the war room with George C. Scott, and he starts giving his more ridiculous speeches about how, well, if we strike now, we won't have more than 10 or 20 million casualties tops, like stuff like that. And I started to kind of click with the humor, like with the satire. And then, like I was telling you, when we finally get to some more of the Peter Sellers stuff, and I legitimately, this is ignorance on my part, did not realize he played 3 parts in the movie. Like, I just did not realize that he played the president, who's always on the phone with Dmitri, the Russian president. He's Mandrake, who's having his back and forth in the office with Ripper, like, the whole movie, and their little chemistry, and then obviously playing Dr. Strangelove. When we finally got to the scenes where he's the president on the phone with Dmitri, I legitimately, every time he was like rolling. I thought that shit was like the funniest, best written stuff ever.
No,
and
it's all in you. No, I can be more sorry than you.
I can't be more sorry than you, Dmitri. I swear. I mean, and when he first gives him the news, he's just like, well, nobody's more upset about it than me, Dmitri. I mean, think about how I feel. I feel terrible.
If this was a threat, then if this call was a threat, then, well, you wouldn't be getting it.
And like I told you, the whole setup of the phone call is a big you see now what had happened was, Dimitri, he wouldn't make a silly error,
I feel like
we
this movie
accidentally
came out in
watched all the stuff, yeah.
1964, and that, at least that specific conversation, I feel like that sequence of dialogue could have been written today, just of how just advanced that comedy is. And like, that is so awesome, because that is that type of humor that you just don't see ever, let alone in back in that day. So it was like one of those where it's like, yeah, that definitely transcends, like it definitely sticks out, like in a good way.
Like if I was to watch this movie in like 5-minute chunks of select scenes, I feel like I would like really dig it. Like if I was to go back and watch like this scene, and like I liked even some of the stuff later with Sellers as Mandrake, where he's like trying to get through to the president, and he's like, well, could you possibly make it a collect call, because he doesn't have enough change to call the president. And she's like, I need 55 cents, and he tells the guy to just break the Coke machine to get the thing, and the guy just told, you're gonna have to answer to the Coca-Cola company, just so seriously.
It sprays him in the face, and it's like,
there's sillier, like once it got into the sillier stuff, like later half in the movie, I was more into it. It just, for me, it still takes forever to kind of get there. So I mean, I will say, Steven, I used to be in exactly the same boat as you, into where I still don't love the movie, but in a more positive note, I'm in more positive like 3-star territory with it, if that's fair enough, you know what I mean, rather than being in like 1-star territory where that was for the longest time. So that's a pretty significant jump. So I will say it clicked a little more here, and obviously from here on out, maybe the next time I go back to it, maybe 6 months from now, a year from now, it could maybe click even more now that I've got a new mindset about it. So I will say, to be fair, like I just don't, I'm still not seeing where some people, think it's like the funniest movie ever made. I'm not there, like at all, all. Yeah. So
the way I'm able to like have it click in my brain is this movie is similar to like Fargo, where it's essentially a parody of itself in terms of like the war genre, just like in Fargo is kind of a parody of like the heist / kidnapping, type of stuff, but it's still serious in its own right. So it balances the goofiness, you know what I mean? And I feel like it does a good job of that. It's only 90 minutes, so it flies by, which like obviously maybe not fully for you because it takes a while for that to pick up. But like I love the whole beginning where it's just the dun 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 dun. It's in the war, and it's like, all right, everyone on the plane, when they're going up, they're like, all right, plan R, let's go, and we're going, all right, lock and load, let's do it. And it's got that side, and then you go into the war room, and then you set up Buck, and you set up Jack D. Ripper with Mandrake, and then you finally introduce the president, then you finally introduce Dr. Strangelove. You don't realize Dr. Strangelove is not in the movie. It's like 45 minutes in or something like that.
Oh yeah, no, it's like I forgot he didn't show up till really it's like almost an hour, like till he shows up. Yeah. I mean, it takes a while for the title character to show, and he honestly is probably my least favorite out of the 3 Peter Sellers characters. If I'm being like, I think I like the president first, and his conversations with Dimitri, I think, are high for me. And then I like the Mandrake chemistry he has with our boy from The Killing, Johnny, playing Ripper. So like I like their kind of scenes more. And then Dr. Strangelove was just like so over the top that it was almost like not vibing with the rest of the movie for me. But like I was still enjoying, Sellers selling it like 100%. I mean, he's all in on it. So I at least appreciated that.
And like I said, like even the comedy, like the main the big scene is like, gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room. Like the irony and like these types of sentences that they're saying, and like the whole time that Buck is like, oh yeah, I'm a menace I'm killing, blah blah blah. He's so ready for death, but it's like he's also supposed to be the good guy. But he's like, oh, like you said, all the sacrifice, blah blah blah. So it does those. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier, where it's like it's clearly satiring, like power and like abuse of power, and kind of just the hunger to like be on top and all that stuff, but also still not, it's still projecting the story forward. So I'll talk about it later. But my number 10, this is a movie at this point that I just think I just haven't seen enough, and I genuinely believe if this movie was only 2 hours, that this might actually be like top 3 for me. But I really feel the pace in this, and that's Eyes Wide Shut.
Okay.
I really like the story. It's not rewatchable by any stretch of the imagination for me, just because the just it's one of the ones where like kind of what I was talking about with Barry Lyndon, where you're sitting there and, you know, just letting everything soak. Like you can do that a couple times when you're like sitting in the scenes with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. You're kind of just like sitting with them, and you're obviously seeing that their marriage is not where it wants to be. So you need those scenes to really set up why Tom Cruise is willing to go on this journey and kind of like have that, you know, that interesting, like why he's willing to go into that, you know, put himself in that position and then deal with all the stuff that he deals with. So you have to have that at the beginning, but it does it, you know, throughout. And it's one of those ones where it's like, you know, I don't know, it just never, I feel like there's just something missing, and I honestly don't know what it is. And I just genuinely think it's the length for me. Like, it's not, it's hard to say like what I would take out. I feel like I would just need to cut. And I feel like this is at this point, Kubrick was like, hey, I'm Stanley Kubrick. And, you know, it's kind of like what Tarantino's doing right now and Scorsese's doing right now, where it's like, hey, everything that I'm putting out there is great. So just, you know, revel in it. And I feel like that this one of the few where it just affects, like what I hear the complaints about, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for people, like I feel I kind of have that with this movie, because a lot of this stuff that's creepy in this, like in the beginning, I love everything with the party and all that stuff. You introduce Sidney Pollack's character and everything he's going through, all that stuff, like all that's necessary, like, you know, character development and introducing these characters, setting up the world, everything with, you know, when Tom Cruise and, like I said, and her, you're building that relationship up. And then you're getting introduced to the party, the intrigue, the mystery, and all that stuff. But as soon as you really start going down the rabbit hole, it's one of those ones like, all right, we need to have kind of like a high moment and then just have a finale. But at that, it does this, it goes to the top and then goes for a little bit and then has the finale. And I feel like there's a stretch where it's like, all right, we need to peak a little bit sooner. So I don't know. It's like, I don't have anything negative to say. Like, I really like the movie, but if I'm like at this point, you know, trying to compare this entire filmography, it's honestly like, even if I go in on a rewatch one day, you know, like 2 years down the road, similar to you with Doctor Strangelove, I can't imagine it jumping any of these other movies at this point. Like, it's just kind of like the rankings from this point on could fluctuate any given Sunday, but I feel like Eyes Wide Shut, Barry Lyndon will always be my 10 and 11, and then 3 through 9 could fluctuate, but my 1 and 2 will always be the same, and then 3 through 9 can whatever depending on any day, and then 10 and 11 are just kind of what it is. So, you know, I like the movie. I love Tom Cruise. Like, I'm starting to realize that Tom Cruise is becoming one of my favorite actors. So like, I love him in this movie, and I love like the weirdness in the movie, and I love like scenes like similar to what you were just talking about, Doctor Strangelove. Like, I could go back and watch scenes of this movie and really enjoy it, and I feel like that's, you know, but as a whole, it's Barry Lyndon and Eyes Wide Shut are just two movies that I'm not really going to start from start to finish that often. So that's where I'm at with 10.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. I'll talk about that one later. So yeah.
Apparently Stephen would too.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about it a lot later. So we'll talk about it. But yeah, that's interesting. So that was your number 10. So my number 9. And I'll say this before we even get into my next 3. All my 9, 8, and 7 are all like in 4-star territory for me. So they're all very strong movies. They're just not like the all-timers for me that we'll get into in my top 6. But they're all very, very enjoyable. I will say that. So it's really just which one really emotionally got me, I guess. I don't know, or just really, you know, really clicked. So my number 9 is Spartacus. And number 9, and really it's a very enjoyable, like one of these old school you know, epics, you know, in the vein of like a 10 Commandments or a Cleopatra or something like that. And it's really good. I just, you know, it's definitely the one that sticks out like a sore thumb as far as not really feeling like a Stanley Kubrick movie, because it really wasn't. He was kind of the, you know, if you look at the behind the scenes, there was another guy who filmed the movie for like a week and then got fired. And then, you know, Kubrick was one of those guys who was around the same studio, and they were like, hey, we just kind of need a guy who knows how to film a movie. And he had done Paths of Glory at that point, so he had done at least some bigger scale stuff, like not huge scale stuff, like with using 10,000 extras like Spartacus does, but it's like, you know, we need a guy. And so I think he even was just like, all right, it's a paycheck, and if I do a good job, maybe they'll let me just do whatever I want after, you know, which he kind of does, you know, and gets into more of his movies after the fact. But yeah, it's just kind of the one that sticks out as far as not being like really a Kubrick movie. Like there's nothing Kubrickian about it. It's just kind of old Hollywood. But not to say that's bad. I like Spartacus. I had always thought that because I had seen this movie a long time ago and I rewatched it this week and I hadn't seen it in a minute. I thought there was more gladiator stuff than there was. Like there's the first hour where he's there, but like I always thought there was a scene where he got to like the big arenas, but it was just like the little one at the school, and then they do the revolt and they break out. Yeah. I had misremembered the movie where he was like actually sort of like in Gladiator with Russell Crowe, where he's like in the arena a couple of times, before they revolt. But that was me misremembering that. But yeah, it's still a really good story. I will say the reason it ranks a little lower, I think Kirk Douglas is serviceable in this movie, but I don't think he's particularly great. He's better in another Kubrick movie that we'll talk about. I think he's much better in a different movie. For me, I think what elevates this movie is the supporting cast. It really has like meaty roles to dig into. Like I think Laurence Olivier is a straight savage in this movie, especially like where his character goes and some of the character stuff that he digs into, with Dude's wife and stuff, and like some of the decisions he makes. The guy who I believe won the Oscar, the guy who runs the Gladiator School, he's really good, and he's a lot of fun. And even your boy from Witness for the Prosecution is in there as that main senator. Charles Lawton, and he's really good in there. And I wouldn't have really recognized him had I not watched Witness for the Prosecution when we did Top 64. So that dude was cranking out some good stuff too. So he's great. And
he was the little finger of this movie, where he's out there with all the girls and kind of doing the whorehouse stuff, and he's and like when you look at him, like at least when you look at Littlefinger in Game of Thrones, you're like, I guess some girls might actually find him interesting. But when you see like Charles Lawton in this movie, like he's got all the girls, like really, like power by
that guy. Well, and you kind of get it when he's just handing out millions of whatever their currency was, like it's nothing. You're like, okay, I think this guy's pretty loaded, and that's kind of why he's got girls hanging around him. He can just afford to live that lifestyle. But that's what I mean. It's like I think the supporting characters have a little more meat on their bones than like what Kirk Douglas is given.
Who's in Psycho, the boyfriend in Psycho. He
right.
And he does a good job of just kind of having a little bit of his own emotional story. So yeah, like I totally agree with you. The supporting cast is fantastic, and even the black guy who sacrificed himself in that scene when they have that fight, like even though he doesn't have development behind him, what he stands for and represents, stands out, and it's very memorable. So that's one of those.
Yeah,
I
know. I get
where you're coming from with Kirk Douglas.
Yeah. I just think Kirk he shows a little more range in another movie that we'll talk about. I'm sure at some point pretty soon. I just think he's better in that movie. But yeah, because this is just him just being like the big like stoic like I'm Spartacus, like big just more thing. I will say he's really good in the final scene, and where his character ends up. And I will say Kubrick is definitely a fan of things not working out for our heroes type of movie, or endings that don't quite are exactly crowd pleasing rah endings, especially for Spartacus, and where he and his buddies kind of end up in this movie. But yeah, everything's well done. All the epic like battle scenes are crazy. Like that one scene when they're rolling like the logs on fire or whatever, like into people, I was like, oh my God. Like I was watching that, I was like, there's really a thing on fire, like running into people. Like, do they have any kind of insurance back then? Like, what is going on here? Like, how did they do this?
When you hear stories about like Ben-Hur back in the day with the chariot race, like, like these old movies, they do these things, and it's like old time Hollywood as wild as
I don't know. Yeah, it was a Wild West. So I was just like, my jaw was dropped. I was like, oh my God, the guy just got ran over by like a flaming log. Like, what just happened there? So yeah, it's good stuff. It's very enjoyable. Again, it's in the 4-star territory. It's just I'm gonna have to be in the right mood and mindset to like put this on just casually. Unless we just have it on some like if we do like a old Hollywood epics, episode or something, and then we put like Spartacus in there, with some of these movies. But you got to be in the right mindset. But they all look great. I have this on 4K. It looks amazing.
Or if you guys ever do a tier rank or a tournament fight with just title character movies, so it's like and so you have to bring it up again. You're like, well, in that case, it actually ranks kind of high because of what.
Yeah, it's pretty high as far as in those. Yeah. But I like this core story. I like a lot of the performances. It's good. I just don't see myself like casually putting this on a whole lot as more as some of these other movies. Yeah, but it's still really good. I like it.
I'll talk about it in a couple. My number 9 at this point. This is honestly the lowest this movie's ever been in my ranking. And the reason why it's on this last rewatch of a couple of these ones, this one got jumped because honestly, just of the overall entertainment value. Like this movie has things that I admire and things that I love and things that I can like appreciate and go back to in terms of like, anything. But I just don't, and I've given this multiple times. Like this is one of my ones this probably, if not the one I've seen the most, I've seen it like one of the most, just simply because I've tried to like force it higher. And I just honestly, at this point, I've established that I can't. And that's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Like I really like this movie. When I saw it in theaters, I thought it was one of my favorite movies of all time because of the spectacle and just how it made me feel. I was immersed in the world. But when I try and watch it at home, I find myself checking out, and it's nothing to the movie's fault. Like what it's doing its job. It's doing what it needs to do. And like the highs are freaking high. But in terms of just like the whole, it just doesn't click in terms of at this point where I'm ranking. I'm not emotionally invested in anything. Like HAL 9000 is an amazing character. It's beautiful to look at. The scene, when he's reading the lips and the two characters are talking about, like the way it sets it up and it keeps zooming in on the eye, and it has like a nice, it's almost like a Sam Raimi like zoom in where it's like you pan in on the face and you're like,
right. Even though there's no face to zoom in on, it's just a light, but you get like what the scene is conveying as far as with the way Kubrick does it, and he turns back to the guys, that he's like zooming in on their mouths, and figuring out what they're saying.
And that's visual storytelling, that's show not tell. But with this, almost the entire movie is show not tell. So 2.5 hours of that is just like, it gets to a point where you're like, all right. But like, I love everything with the Star Child at the end of the movie. Like I love all that stuff, like everything when it goes through the wormhole and it's like real trippy, and and the score is beautiful. I love a lot of the technical stuff about this movie. It just, in terms of, now when we're comparing one of my favorite directors of all time, I latch on to the least physically about this, or emotionally about this. Whereas like physically what's on screen is beautiful to look at, but I don't, there's not a single care, even HAL 9000, like I love the end, like when he's dying, he's singing Daisy and all that. Like, you're like, damn, dude, I love HAL 9000, even though he's fucking a murdering psychopathic AI.
and when he's trying to be manipulative, like when the dude's about to shut him down, he's just like, Dave, I'm much better now, Dave. No, I'm really fine now. Everything will be like just the way it was, Dave. Exactly. Just like trying to convince him, just like, no, don't worry, I'll switch off my programming, Dave. We'll be fine now. Like when he's about to, when he's resetting the thing or whatever. Like, all that stuff's great. No, I mean, I'll talk about it a little bit more later, but I think it helped also that, well, like you, I've seen it on the big screen, so that definitely helps as far as people who maybe don't click with it. First couple of times, the first time I ever saw it was in a Cinemark XD, which is like not like an IMAX, but it's a big screen with a big giant sound system, and like that was the first time I'd ever saw it. So I was able to get like in a dark theater, giant screen, like get wrapped up in just the spectacle of everything, kind of like a Lawrence of Arabia type thing, and really get like wrapped up in it. So it definitely helps. But even I've even watched this movie just outside of any of these shows, like a couple of times within the last 2 years, like just casually just putting it on, just wanting to kind of see the spectacle of it,
and
it's
a good background movie. Like it's a good movie. Like when we're doing shows, if I just want to have a movie in the background and just keep looking over it, I'll appreciate it every time I look.
And be like, oh, hey, there's the dude walking in the circle, like that's awesome. And there's the lady, there's the waitress like floating around, like serving the food, like that's fun. Just kind of glance at it, just be like, oh yeah.
He brings up a good point. What are your thoughts on the ending?
I think it's fine because, again, this is a movie that screams for interpretation. I mean, and that's the kind of the idea of it. Like from start to finish, every scene can be interpreted, 8 different ways, as far as like what it's trying to say. And that's why this movie to this day, 55, whatever years later, is still being talked about and interpreted. What does the Star Child mean? What does it mean when he's in the wormhole and all of a sudden he's an old man just like eating by himself at a table in a weird room? Like, what does that mean? Like, and then he's reborn.
The entire movie is the evolution of life. Like, if you really think about it, whenever the monolith shows up, we're jumping to the next period in time. And the monolith is like, you already talked about it earlier, so maybe that's why I'm making this comparison. But the monolith is like Forrest Gump, where it's like you're going through space and time, and the monolith just happens to be there.
Is the constant. 100%. It's always steady, just there, but it like shows up every time we turn a corner with evolution or with some advancement or whatever. Yeah, it's always there. It's there
this
on
movie
the moon.
Has one of the best edits probably in the history when the ape throws up the bone
and it comes back down.
Like it's one of those where it's like, yeah, that's that, and then like the opening crawls whenever you just boom, and then the camera work, like Kubrick, and obviously it looks fantastic. It still holds up. You know what I mean? Like I said, everything on a technical level is chef's kiss. But when I'm actually sitting down and watching a movie and thinking about how am I going to compare this, like I said, this is literally the lowest it's ever been on my list, and it's not because of a negative. It's just the other ones at this point are higher up.
No, and this is one again when you're making a list like this that has so many great movies, like something has to be number 9, right? Like or something has to be number 8. It's like it's one of those things where you can't get really mad. It's like, well, I mean, personally, something's got to be number 1, 2, and 3, and it's going to be the ones that just that you just love to pieces. So I get it, but
like if you always pick the cliche ones, then it makes it less interesting. So sometimes you have to have ones like this or not.
Sometimes it's fine, but then sometimes the cliche one is the real one. Like, well, the Dark Knight is the Dark Knight is the Dark Knight. Like
some might say Pulp Fiction. You know what I mean? Like
no, but I get that too. It's like, but Pulp Fiction is the shit. So like, if you pick it, pick it. But yeah, it's fine. So yeah, I'll talk about 2001 a little bit more later. We won't go into too much more when I get to it, but I'll talk about it a little bit later. So yeah, what are we up to? Number 8, right? So number 8 was one of my. So my number 8 and number 7 are my other 2 first-time watches. And again, to be 4 stars right off the bat on a first-time watch is pretty damn good. It's pretty great.
Without you telling which one it is, I went in with another prediction, and knowing that obviously you just kind of hinted at being a first-time watch and knowing what your first-time watches are, it makes me happier. I was like, all right, I'm confident that you're at least positive on it, and like positive, like, you know what I mean? So let's see. I'm curious.
Yeah. So both of them are positive. So my number 8 is The Killing. So yeah. So
not as high as I would have expected, but I'll still accept that.
Right. But again, a 4-star. I thought it was great. Like, and I will go back and watch this again, like in another year or two, because I really enjoyed it. The Killing is definitely. And it's funny, it's a when you go back and see like. You think of Kubrick, you think about these like big, 2.5, 3-hour movies, and both like The Killing and Paths of Glory are like 85 minutes, and you're like, oh, that's refreshing, oh, that's nice. So like I put it on, and I was like, oh, I'll be done in no time, and it's a really cool. Old school sort of, I won't go into too much detail because I still feel like, like you would probably agree it's really underseen. Like a lot of people have not seen this movie. So it's more of like a deconstruction of like a heist movie, this heist sort of set around this horse race and this track, and these guys kind of putting a team together again of everybody doing specific jobs and everybody kind of having a background. But what makes the movie cool is I guarantee you, Quentin Tarantino is a fan of this movie. I can absolutely guarantee you he is, with all the different like ways it jumps around in the nonlinear style of like we follow a character to that character's conclusion, but then we jump backwards and follow another character like what they were doing, earlier in the day and kind of follow them, and then we jump back and go to like another character and like what they were doing during the heist and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's really like gritty and kind of dark for like a 1956 movie, like especially where a lot of the characters sort of end up. Like I really enjoyed a lot of the character dynamics. I thought the George guy and his like sort of gold digger, crazy wife, I like their dynamic.
Oh my
God.
God.
She is a piece of work. I'll tell you that, man. Oh my God.
Having characters like that makes movies like this stand out the most, because it just shows like you have the guy that's doing it for his girl who's using him, and she's kind of like puppeteering, and it's one of those where it's like, and then he's already a weak link as it is, and she just adds to it, and then she adds her own personal drama, and now you have the other people who witness it, so now it starts bringing heat onto the team, and it's like, oh my God, he's
great. The guy who kind of leads it, like we're talking about the Johnny dude who's also in Doctor Strangelove. And then I was like, where do I know this guy from? I know he looks familiar. And then I looked up, I'm like, oh yeah, it's Captain McCluskey from The Godfather, the guy that Al Pacino shoots in the Italian restaurant, like the asshole police captain. I was like, oh, okay, there's okay, I got you. It's
first $1 million punks.
Yeah. No, he's so great, and I'm glad that I've gotten to see or recognize him for like 2 other roles because he's really great. He's a lot of fun.
He's got one
but
of
yeah,
those
his
presences with his tone. And
he's got that like really square face, and he's got that like hard tone, and like he's really great in the way they set up his whole arc of like with him and his girl and him trying to get the money. And oh my God, I won't spoil it, but what happens to the money and where it ends up at the end of this movie, I was like, oh no,
one of my favorite endings of all time.
Yep. I when I got there, I was the same way. I was just like, oh, because it's one of those things where you're on pins and needles because let's just say like things go wrong, but some things, are going right for the character, but they're still trying to there's still tension of if they can get away, whatever. And like where it ends up, you're just like, oh God, that sucks. That just sucks. And yeah, again, Kubrick doesn't really like happy endings where it ends up. So yeah, things don't exactly work out for our characters. But yeah, and again, to have that, reaction to the endings means I was really invested in the movie and kind of invested where everybody was. So I mean, I really enjoyed it. So I can definitely see myself going back to it and maybe climbing, in the future. But yeah, I really dug The Killing. It was a good watch. It was a good time. I liked it a lot.
That was the one I was confident. I was actually thinking it might have been higher, but obviously you've already hinted at a lot of these are favorites. So the fact that it's higher than it's lower, but on a high positive note, I'll accept that.
Yeah, it's good.
So my number 8 is a movie that similar to Eyes Wide Shut in terms of like I feel like if this was a little bit shorter, it would be way higher just because of I love the story and I love the quirkiness and I love the weirdness and I love the fact that it's kind of what I was talking about earlier where it's like there's literally it's telling one side, but it's not biased in its side that it's telling. Because if there's you can approach this exact story and it be one way or the other, but I feel like it sets up a nice gray area, so at least you can get invested in the story, and that's Lolita.
Okay.
This is a movie.
I mean, I figure we can go and talk about it. It's my number 7, so we can just jump into it.
I pretty much get. it.
You probably guessed. So yeah, we can talk about it. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So Lolita is a movie that like everything with James Mason is one of those guys where he just kind of like stumbles upon this.
What do you mean, Henry? Lolita is just one of my favorite performances. I just really love the Lolita. I don't know what you mean.
I told you beforehand. I was
like, at number 7.
If Peter Sellers clicked on you at Dr. Strangelove on this rewatch, you're gonna love Lolita because Peter Sellers is wild. Like
he's wild, but I found myself doing James Mason the last 3 days, just around the house. Just walking around the house, going like, "Oh, Lolita." I can't believe where were you last Saturday afternoon?
They're both playing each side. Like they're it's like they're actors within actors. Like the James Mason and the Humpert. Like oh my God, what a name!
Professor Humpert.
Yeah, but Humpert within the family when he's being the family man, quote unquote. Or he's being the dad, or he's being the weird gross lover. Like whenever he's doing all that stuff, he's playing that, but then when he's by himself, like his actual like intentions. And everything with Quilty, like when you see him by himself, he's quirky and stuff, but when he's actually trying to be in charge and trying to like be kind of have a presence, he has more confidence and more all that stuff. So it's like, and then everything with I always forget which one's what. Sue Lyon is Lolita, and Shelley Winters.
And Shelley Winters is the annoying stepmom or whatever. Yeah.
I would call her annoying. She's got her.
Well, no. I don't mean annoying in a performance. I just mean her character is just like grating, and you can tell on James Mason like throughout the movie. Like he's just like, oh my God, woman, would you like shut the fuck up and leave me alone? like I just mean it in that way. Like you can see it in his performance.
She just wants
he was
to
just
be
like,
loved, man. She's
lonely. I know. She's been lonely for 7 years, ever since Hobart died, whatever the hell his name was, her old husband, passed away 7 years ago. No, she's really horny in this movie. Like she just wants James Mason to just throw her down on the bed and like take advantage of her. But no, I just mean her character as far as like her neediness and stuff. Like that's more. I don't mean that the performance is good. I just mean the character. In the way it's presented.
I guess my main question with you is: this is a movie that people nowadays in today's eyes they could automatically just brush it off because of just what society tells people to think. So what is your thoughts on the morals of this story?
No, and I was thinking about that, once I had finished the movie, and to me, I go into a movie going, okay, what story is this movie presenting me with? And just, I'm looking to see how good it tells the story. So if it was telling the story and it was a complete, shit show as far as like, it was just awful, but this movie, as much as the material is like an older guy, obviously, like getting infatuated with and being obsessed over, like essentially what 14 or 15, however she old is 14. In this movie, a 14-year-old girl. Like it's earnest in its storytelling, in the way it explores. It's more of an exploration of James Mason's character and more of a character study of like him becoming completely obsessed and protective and almost psychotic in his need for her to like be with him or whatever. But it's like, I have to go with what the movie is presenting me with, like what the story is that it's presenting me with. So, and I don't think the movie tells it in a way that makes me feel scummy, like I need to take a shower afterwards. Like it's being earnest in what he's saying. And I don't think Stanley Kubrick is like endorsing the behavior, because the guy obviously goes off a cliff, like, mentally, and becomes so obsessed that he becomes self-destructive, and literally he becomes a murderer, so they're not endorsing that, this is like a good thing. The people around the movie, the neighbors and everything who are starting to suspect certain things are kind of like, they don't outright say it, but they're like, we're kind of concerned about like you and Lolita and the time you spend together, like what you're doing, like the movie is not endorsing that, but it's also telling this story in a way where you can see where he's coming from, but it's not endorsing it, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And like you can get wrapped up in it.
And also I love the fact that Lolita's over sexualized personality is more of a play on her getting her way and her using that to, like there's a scene like halfway through, like the very beginning, like even before he tells her about her mom dying, that she was like, hey, or it might have been after the fact, but it's around that time. It's still fresh into the them together relationship, where it's like, hey, don't you love me? Blah blah blah. I need you to sign this so I can be in the play. You know what I mean? It's like she's like essentially like manipulating him to be a dad through sexualized flirting, because that's what he wants, and she needs a father. You know what I mean? And she's like, I'm gonna play both sides of this coin. So it's like she's like, what do I have to do to get a father? I have to kind of pretend to be a lover at some times. And it's like, that's why I said it's like the moral gray area in this movie is actually, it's a lot more dense than people would give it credit for in today's eyes, freshly. Like people would just see it face value, and it's like, it's not. Like, you really got to read between the lines, and I think it does a great job, and it's really ahead of its time.
And just on a surface level, they don't ever show them like kissing. They don't show them like, having sex or any of that stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff
and that's for one of two reasons. One, they literally, obviously, the fact that they're not trying to, show it that it's okay, but also the fact that Sue Line is literally 14 in the movie. So it's like,
she's literally 14. No, and I understand. But there's things that are implied where she's like, we used to play this game at like summer camp, and he's like, what game would that be? And it just like fades to black. Like you just you take and then it jumps, like there's definitely like a time jump, and then they do the whole like, aren't you still in love with me?
Did you tell them about us? And like they hint at things, but like even then that could just be them flirting, you know what I mean? And even then it's promiscuous enough that it's still like tread water like lightly of how we need to talk about this. So like I think they do a good job. One of the things I was just reading randomly, because I was like, I'm curious on like some behind the scenes fact. In the book she's 12, and the studio made them bump her up to 14 because they're like 14's already pushing it, my guy. So
you can't do the 12. That's way over the line.
And then Stanley Kubrick, it's gross, but it's also like, it's just real life. So I'm not judging Kubrick for it. He has an eye for this, but like he's picked her Sue Lines because it said that she had a well-developed breast for her age, and it just would make her feel older. So it would like kind of like add to the story. And it's one of those things where it's like and it's kind of like, it's a good parallel with the story where it's like, he is not saying she has good breasts, but the story needs like this type of adult and mature looking female that would be lured and be sought after. And it's one of those where it's like, all right, so if you look at like I said, read between the lines, and I feel like only Kubrick could really draw, teeter that line, and I feel like he does a fantastic job with that. And it's one of those weird ones because you're like, wow, this is a Kubrick movie. Like you just it's like interesting.
It does have weird shit, and I didn't like know where it was going because there was stuff that was actually similar to like Eyes Wide Shut, where he thinks he's being like followed with the people in the cars, and like he's got this like paranoia, in that kind of last act where and all the weird stuff is happening. He's like, what do you mean she checked out of the place? Like I was just here, like a few hours ago. Like what do you mean she's gone? Like with who? Like he's losing his mind, kind of like almost kind of like Tom Cruise is like in the last part of Eyes Wide Shut. So it's kind of a precursor to that. But yeah, like I got really roped up in it. I thought everybody was really good, and yeah, I was more like it wrapped me up in the story as far as seeing where it was going to go, like how it was going to wrap up, and yeah, it was a really good watch, and I enjoyed it probably more than I thought I was going to enjoy it.
And that's what I was happy with, because it starts off awesome, like that opening, like it hooks you from the beginning of like, whoa, where are we going with this? And
well, that's like the opening to Double Indemnity, where you open with the guy in the pool, right? The Billy Wilder movie, yeah, where we start with
Sunset Boulevard, but yeah.
Or Sunset Boulevard. I'm sorry, but doesn't Double Indemnity had open with like a murder too or something?
No,
like,
it opens with him. It opens with him in the office of like telling the story.
Oh, so right, yeah. So it's like kind of the same thing. It's like kind of starting with the end and kind of and then going backwards. But that's what I mean. Like as far as like it starts with kind of
obviously
the ending and back.
Thematically it's similar, but even similar things of like in American Beauty, where in the beginning where it's like, hey, in a year from now I'm going to be dead, and it's like, all right, now how are we going to get there? Because it's not about the end, it's about the journey, and that's what these types of stories are about. How did we get here? How, because it similar thing with the it doesn't end positively, so it's like we're not going to have a happy ending, so now let's showcase that it's going to be a troubled ending. Now let's show why and how, and I definitely commend it for that. So my number 7 is a movie we already talked about, so I'm not gonna it's Spartacus. This is my first 5-star movie. This movie is awesome, dude. Like this movie, like I am Spartacus. That these are the types of movies that what it represents, and it gives me chills because of these are the types of movies. Like, so the very first time I watched this, I was like, okay, that's not what I was expecting, because at that time I was only familiar with the TV show. I'd never seen the TV show, but I've heard of it, and I was like, that's like a 300 super machismo stuff. And don't get me wrong, there's elements of that in here, obviously from a 60s filmmaking standpoint. But for the most part, this is an epic, and this is a character study, and this is a world building thing. And like this is the type of movie that I would not appreciate without having seen Game of Thrones, at the point of like understanding the world and the
politics and the strategy and the sort of what was going on with like the slaves at the time and the order of hierarchy and all that kind of stuff of like the surrounding like what was going on in that Roman Empire and stuff like that. Totally.
So like everything, it's beautiful, and I love just the pacing of this movie. Like the first hour and a half flies by for me because I'm really ramped up in the world. Like it really hammers home like the slave stuff and just of like how we're going from scene to scene. And it's really like how when you got the girls, when they're like looking for their slaves that they want to pick for the fight, and they're like kind of like they seem like if you just checked into that scene randomly, you're thinking that they're trying to rescue them, the way that they're kind of talking about and being positive, like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Because they're not like talking down to them. Like you would not assume they're talking about slaves. It's in a way, it's like they're at the dog pound, like picking up a dog. So obviously there's something wrong with them, where they're like lower class or however you want to phrase it. But like they're like trying to rescue them, but they're literally buying them to go to their death. You know what I mean?
To go to death, yeah. Well, and it's funny. What's his name? The guy who runs the school is like trying to protect Spartacus because he knows he's got like a spark. Like he can make money with Spartacus because he's like the best of the best. So he's trying to be like, oh no, forget him. He's a coward. You should go flog him right now. He broke the rules this morning. But this guy over here, he's the real.
And then they're like stuff like, how's his tooth? Oh, he just took out a guy's leg. Like things like that.
That's what the performance that I love. Yeah, he's almost trying to protect him because he knows he's got something. Yeah.
And then, like I talked about earlier, with the scene with the very first the battle with him and the black guy, like all that was beautiful. They kept talking about that, like no one can beat the trident, and like everything with the rope and how he's jumping in, and you had the training earlier when they're up and down with the things. Comes into play in the battle, like all that stuff is super cool. So it makes all what. That I feel like that's what separates this from an older, a longer film from like 2001, Eyes Wide Shut, Barry Lyndon, where it's like a lot of things that happen in this long stretch of period is like paid off at some point in the movie, and it like showcased like, oh, this is why we had that, this is why we had that one, instead of just like relishing in a visual or relishing in the creepy factor or relishing in just a scene setting story, where it's like, you know, you got the romance between him and the girl that at the very beginning started off not good, because like he's just not, I don't know if it can be interpreted one of two ways, of like he's not deserving, or just like maybe he's a virgin. He's just not confident. He just doesn't know what to do. He's just afraid. But like eventually he develops that family. You know, he has the baby and then all that stuff. And like you said earlier with Laurence Olivier, like everything that he's doing is just creepy and weird. You have the one guy that I can't remember, but he's the one guy that's like the Joaquin Phoenix of the squirmy, like, oh, I'm so yeah, that guy. Like, there's so many characters in this movie, like you said earlier, like the supporting cast is just awesome, dude. So like this is a movie that, you know, it's one that I'm not gonna watch often, but I you know, it's not this one, a rewatch for this movie wouldn't not be like ripping off a Band-Aid, because I'm like, all right, I can sit back and like, you know, a movie like this and Gladiator and Braveheart, like I can put this confidently in those type of epics, because even though it's not as modern in terms of like the action, it still has that modern pace and it goes, you know what I mean? It's telling a story and it's going. So this one really worked for me. It's just, you know, at the point 1 through 6 are my bang bang bang. So like this is my newest 5-star, but like this one I'm confident now at this point. I'm like, this is gonna be a 5-star. This movie's awesome. And like the I Am Spartacus stuff, that single tear when he realizes what's going, like it's like that Rudy moment where everyone starts putting their
and like I said, I think Kirk Douglas in like those moments is really great, and even on the moment again where he's at the end of the movie when she gives him is saying her goodbyes to him, like he's good in those scenes, like when he's given a little bit of more meat to like work with, when he's just kind of like delivering his like speeches about like his strategy and stuff. I think he's fine. I think he's like serviceable. He's just not given a lot to like work with. But when he's given more emotional, I think he's good.
Because what Spartacus represents in this movie is not a war general and is not really a leader. He's a movement. You know what I mean? And I think that's what it. You know, he's the revolution of the slave, the hierarchy of the you know, jumping a class. You know what I mean? From going from slaves to going to a people. Like he's essentially like Spartacus' movie is Asgard. You know what I mean? Like we are Asgard. You know what I mean? Like we are Spartacus. Like that's when I think of that type of thing. So Spartacus isn't just a man; it's a people, and that's why I love about it. That's why when I that clicked for me, I'm like, oh god, that's deep, and that really works for me. So that's why that's my number 7, and it's my lowest of the 5 stars just because of that. But now we're getting to the 5 stars, so I'm really curious to see, you know,
we're into my 5s too now. My 6 on is all like bangers, like all 5-star killers. So it's just as far as like the ones I consider like top 100 material, which my top 3 are in my top 100. So I'll just say that right off the bat. So yeah, they all are. But my 4 through 6 are still like they work for me. You know what I mean? Especially like after these latest rewatches, like they're there. So my number 6 is Paths of Glory, which I just came. 6. Hey, so I actually came to this movie about 6 months ago or so. I just blind bought the Criterion Blu-ray, and not even like prepping for this show, because that was before we did this show. It was just like, you know, I think I was just like in the mood for like more war movies or something. So like I just bought it, and I'd always heard good things, and I was like, oh, and it's also a Kubrick movie, so let me just knock it off and like let me see another Kubrick movie. And yeah, first thing that surprised me is I looked on the back, I was like, 85 minutes. This can't be a Kubrick movie. I must be mistaken. I was like, because I was like, a Stanley Kubrick war movie that's 85 minutes. You got to be shitting me. But when you get into it, and yeah, it's set at World War One. With like the trench warfare stuff, and yeah, it's another Kirk Douglas for anybody just who doesn't know, and it's more of like this is like his it's his character study, but it's also like an anti-war movie, like an outright anti-war movie of just like how ridiculous war can be like sometimes, and the things that people are asked to do, and the moral conundrums that they're given of like they're told to like storm this anthill thing, but like literally it's one of those things where much like real trench warfare, it's like you get out of the trench and like you get 2 feet and you're getting gunned down by machine guns. Like it's so pointless. Like nobody gains anything. And like even Kirk Douglas, who's like, full on, like with the troops there, like even he has to retreat at some point because it's like he can't even do it by himself. Like it's a completely impossible mission. And there's certain guys that don't even get out of the trenches to even start. And the one asshole general is like one of the dudes to like fire on their own trenches just to like make them get out of them. And like, the whole situation is fucked. Like the whole situation is bad.
Yeah, and you need to find a scapegoat of why we're losing or why you political reason. So you have to get the scapegoat. So you go from, I think it was 100 men down to 3, because at that point you're like, we just need to like get something, and you literally charge them with cowardice, abandoning.
He wants to execute like 100 dudes, and eventually he's like, okay, maybe we'll do like a dozen, and then like eventually it just gets down to like these 3, and one of the guys is literally drawn like out of like drawn straws, like they just like draw him out of a hat, like it's all bullshit. And they set up this like basically a kangaroo court where they're not even following like procedure, to where like Kirk Douglas is like, you didn't even like read his like credentials or whatever. Like you're not even following like actual court procedure. You're just like jumping into like all this shit. Like you haven't even formally charged him. Like it's so weird.
And they got him in the cell, which is like an animal cage. You know what I mean? It's like gross, dude. Like it's so brutal.
Disgusting. But what really clicked with me when I was watching it, and even on the rewatch again, and I just watched this movie like 6 months ago, so my rewatch even this week was very close. Is just like how wrapped up I get into those personal stories, especially those 3 guys who are on the trial. And like the one dude, and I need to look up his name, but he's the one very strange, like almost Vincent Schiavelli looking dude, the taller guy. He
the
was
one who kind of looks like the one who looks like the dad in The Witch. That's why.
And he he was in The Killing. He was the guy who shot the horse in The Killing, like the one guy. But like especially him, like I think I think his performance when he's like clinging to the priest and like just completely like bawling his eyes out and just like freaking out because he knows he's gonna die. I think it's one of the best performances I've seen in any Kubrick movie, period. Like I don't know what it was, but like his was so real as far as like, I don't want to die. Yeah, that guy, he's great. And like just like shaking his head all the time, just like, I don't want to die, I don't want to, like whatever it was, like he killed it. And I got so wrapped up into that, and it may be the best sort of execution scene I've ever seen in any movie, like just the way it's just filmed and executed, no pun intended, but like the way it's done
to do the blind, to like mask him, to not mask him, and it kind of like obviously it's not the same, but it always makes me think of like John Coffey in The Green Mile, or just one of those where it's like some people, like they're, regardless of where they are in their life, whether it's a soldier, they're a big huge dude, like some people have their fears, and like it's not the fear of dying, the fear of the dark, like the fear of all this, like it, you get into that. Or it reminds me of like the scene in Saving Private Ryan when the doctor, when he's dying, he's like, he just screaming out for his mother, his mama, what I mean? It's like dude, like it's at the very end, and it's like, oh, these are people, and that's what stands above it. It reminds you that even though this isn't like a true story or anything, but like these are people, I mean, this can happen. You know what I mean? It's like, that's, oh my God, this movie.
No, and that's why this movie, like it was in like sort of 4-star territory for me. And then like I did this rewatch on this one, and like it hit me just as hard the second time, where I was like, oh, this has to be like a 5-star, like because it still just worked the second time all over again, and just like kicked me in my gut. It kicked me in my gut. Like this movie knocked my socks off, like even 6 months later rewatching it again. And Kirk Douglas, I think, is even better, like in those scenes in the courtroom where he's just like this is wrong, and guys, like you're charging people with cowardice, like none of you would have been storming the thing by yourselves anyways, just like these guys, like you're all ridiculous, like this whole thing is insanity. Like he's
what's awesome
great
about this movie? No Man Land scene is just it 50 years later, 60 years later, 7 years later, it stands a test of time. And it's like it's an epic action scene. It's like, dude, the sound design, just the setup, the
sound design is I have a great soundboard. Like the sound design, even on a 57 movie. 57 was a great year, by the way. Bridge on the River Kwai, this movie, 12 Angry Men, Witness for the Prosecution. That's a hell of a year right there. Some good movies. some damn good movies. Good stuff. But no, you talk about it a little bit. I'm gushing over Paths of Glory, but only because again it held up so well even a few months later. Yeah,
Paths of Glory is one of those ones where I feel like similar to what I was talking about with Spartacus on the last one. It's like the very first time I honestly didn't know what to expect the very first time. So every subsequent rewatch, it's just gone up and solidified it as a 5-star. And I feel like what separates this and Spartacus at the bottom tier of the 5 stars is the fact like this one's just so rewatchable, so quick. It has an emotional punch like Spartacus, but because of just that rewatch factor, and it's beautiful to look at with the black and white cinematography. The No Man's Land, I would rather have the No Man Land scene of the two movies combined, like that's my favorite scene. So that's what stands out. Like when I watch rewatch Wonder Woman every time, I'm like, I would rather have Paths of Glory. Like Wonder Woman's cool and the score is awesome when you're going through it, but Paths of Glory just rocks it out, dude, because it just feels so real. So Steven's actually a little bit surprised that it's so low. He expects to be top 3, but at this point,
no, I mean, but again, I've been talking about it a lot because I watched it so recently, and then it came up literally on. We did war movies literally last night on Tier Ranker Fights. So like, and me and Richie were both championing this movie like really hard and got it into the S tier. So like, because it is, and like it's just more of like it's a recency thing. It just happens to be popping up a lot. Like I said last night, I was like, oh, I'll be talking about this movie again tomorrow night on Kubrick. Like it's really good. It's just one of those things where like it's not in my top 100 right now, but like on the way it's like blazing a path right now, it definitely could be, you know what I mean? It could blaze in there. So at some point, so I'll definitely say that.
All right, so my number 5 now at this point, like if my 1 through 5 are not all in my top 100, they're like in contention any given Sunday. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like now we're at the point where we're in my S tiers at this point. My number 5 is the one where it's just the most out there, you know what I mean, of these 5 remaining for me. It's A Clockwork Orange. I love this movie. You know, Alex DeLarge is one of my favorite characters because of just the it's one of those arcs that like is it a true arc? Is it a fake arc? Is it a false? Is it a pretend one? Like, what are we doing here? The movie is so weird and wild, and it's an apocalyptic future that it's like, hey, we're not going to explain. You're just going to go with the journey, and you're just going to accept it. And it's like, I bet, you know what I mean? I have no issues. Like speaking in soliloquies, everything with the Ludwig van, the weird sex orgy threesome that he has where they're having sex.
Sped up one with the fast motion.
And even before he meets the girls, they're sucking on the penis-shaped lollipops. Like, what's up with yours? And it's all like bent and limp. And it's like, that type of humor where it's like, you have to be all in on this world, dude. And like, so, and there's essentially 3 halves of this movie: the full-on anarchy, the prison reform, and then the aftermath of that, of like the reform. And it's like there's the three arcs of this. Like there's really good 3 structures, and it's like, all right, so when you go in, like, boom, the chaos, you have to be accepting of it at that point, or else you're not gonna be able to appreciate the journey. And then so you go there, and then everything with him and his droogs, the milk bar, setting up the anarchy, beating up the homeless guy, ironically saving a girl from a rape so they can rape her, or maybe, you know what I mean? They get everything they're doing is so crazy,
or just so they can go fight, but they need them to let her go so they can just have a fun brawl in like this warehouse, or whatever.
There's just such evil, and like I said, it's one of those where it's like, even like in Escape from New York, of how it has that apocalyptic stuff and it does weird things. They at least explain like, oh, X, Y, and Z. Whereas this one, there was like, nope, this is just where we're at right now, and boom, you're just gonna take it. And I have the tattoo right here. Oh, this one. I have it right here, just so that the iconic scene of just at the end of the tunnel and just them. It's like, all right, get ready, with the batons, and then they're fighting and they're beating up the guys, and it sets up where like later, it's 2 full circle moments. The first time when they beat up the homeless guy, and then later he kind of like is down on his luck and he meets the homeless guy, and the homeless guy, they have that reconnection. Then later when they kill the wife, and then he actually gets beat up by the droogs.
By the droogs,
and then he goes to the dude's house. Which, fun fact, his caretaker, that's a David Prowse.
That's Darth Vader. It's Darth Vader, bro.
Body Darth Vader. That's so cool. That's one of my fun most proud things that I'll always know. You know what I mean? That some people still don't know that to this day, and I will always know that.
And how big that dude was. That dude was like a jacked up bodybuilder. He's ginormous in this movie. Like he was carrying that dude up and down the things with the wheelchair and stuff. Like, he's massive, bro.
Yeah, so Clockwork Orange is one of those movies that it's like I said, if I'm comparing these top 5, like, dude, like I love it, and it's I didn't have my name on there, it's for me, but I love it, and it's just one of those where it's like, all right, like how am I feeling today? Is it a
Clockwork Orange day?
Am I in the mood for chaos? Like, I definitely have to be in the mood for it. Whereas my top 4, I can just throw on, no doubt, no issues. I don't need to be in a specific mood, so that's why I went with that ranking. So that's why it's at number 5.
Yeah. No, and it's kind of similar. Like again, all these are bangers, but even my 4 and 5, I have to be in the right setting, like in the right mood to like sit down and watch them. But like my top 3, I can watch pretty much any time and like no problem, like whatsoever. So my number 5 is one you talked about earlier. It's Eyes Wide Shut. Especially on this rewatch, I'm just so fascinated by this movie. Like this movie just engrosses me every time. Like as far as I'm just drawn to, like about once a year, I'm just drawn to watch this movie, you know, like to just really dig into it.
It's technically
and get really wrapped up into
Christmas,
it. Yeah, I can watch it around Christmas time, and it's a nice Christmas movie from Stanley Kubrick. Yeah, there's all kinds of decorations everywhere. You know, the Domino's got a nice tree in her apartment, and yeah, nice, you know, Christmas cookies and stuff everywhere. No, it's good stuff. But I just love how much of just a weird, trippy nightmare this movie is. Like, and just this movie is just chock full of like what the fuck moments, and I just love how the slow descent into madness this movie is, with the weird conversation, like you said, that him and Nicole Kidman have, where it kind of starts out they're just smoking pot and like chilling out, and then like they're about to like make love, and then it's just like, and then she just freaks out. Yeah, she gets so weird and jealous, and like just like, what do you mean? Like, so you know, you mean they were just gonna like look at me because they wanted to fuck me? You know, what was that's all the guy? And he's just trying to make casual thing. He's like, no, like he's trying to give her a compliment. Like, no, you're really beautiful. It's just I have you to myself. You know, like, but I can see why they're doing it because you're gorgeous. Like he's trying to pay her a compliment. She's just like not having it. But like that stuff like sets it off, and he obviously sets him off into the night on this weird odyssey, and all these scenes you can just like you can interpret in weird ways, like which scenes are even really happening, like or what he's even really encountering, or like what's the real story. Obviously the main set piece of the movie is just so weird, but like I love weird culty stuff like in movies. It's just, you know, just the music in that scene is amazing, like all the crazy imagery, stuff with the occult like is great. And then I even love almost the aftermath stuff when he leaves the place in the second half of the movie, even more than that, with like all the stuff where he thinks he's being followed, and like he goes to follow up with people, and there's just like weird stuff happening with people, you know, all of a sudden there's different character dynamics where like Lily Sobieski and then the guy who runs the costume shop, it has like a weird dynamic now, and she's like selling her. It's just like, that's weird. Okay, that's strange. And then the chick turns up dead, and like you know, old Nightcrawler at the hotel desk is like telling him, you know, about the dude getting taken out of the hotel in the middle of the night. Like just how weird this movie just feels. Like if I'm in the mood, like I watch this movie a lot, like late at night, because it just feels like a dream, you know, it just feels like very dreamy. And especially there's those dream things where he gets home from the thing and she talks about the dream she had from where he came from, of like, there were all these dudes around me, like watching us have sex, and like, you know, and I was being used and stuff. And he's just like having a total mind fuck, like a mind trip. Like this movie's just such a mind trip. And I just get wrapped up in it every time I watch it. Like, it's just so jarring, but like I love just how weird this movie is, and I get something out of it new every time.
I really like I kind of talked about earlier. Like I feel like I just haven't seen it enough, and like at this point I'm really solidified in like my taste of Kubrick. So like this could jump in. I guess technically this could maybe go as high as Over Lolita and be a 5-star one day, maybe, and be the new lowest of the 5 stars. I do love cult movies, and it definitely has that cult aspect to it. But I feel like it's one of those things where it's just like I don't know. It's missing something. I don't know if it's a length, and I really don't know, because it really sets up that you know, mystery, that vague aspect of like really the, like, for example, like what separates like this and like Mulholland Drive for me is like Mulholland Drive is so wacky and weird where it's always doing something, whereas in this one it's like taking its time getting into its wackiness. So like it's walking, running, walking, running, walking, running, whereas like Mulholland Drive is just a solid jog the entire time of weird stuff, you know what I mean? So like that's what's different. And so so like I honestly, as soon as you said that, I'm like, cool, you know what I mean? I'm not judging you for it. I like how
ironically
this
fever dream this movie is.
Film, you know, in
it's a cult movie.
there's a lot of people that have it like at their 1 and 2, and it's like, wow,
Hey, Mark, I was watching a clip before we went live of Martin Scorsese was on with Roger Ebert in like 2000. They were talking about like their favorite movies in the 90s, and Martin Scorsese has had his like number 4 of his movies in the 90s, like of all the movies in the 90s, like number 4. Like he was like all in on this movie. So like there's people that champion this movie. I like this movie too. I can't watch it like all the time. I'm like you. I can't just like put this on casually. I need to like sit down and like watch it. But like I really like Eyes Wide Shut, like, and how crazy it gets. Yeah, I dig it.
All right, so my number 4. Yeah, I'll talk about it since we've already talked about it. My number 4 is Doctor Strangelove. This is a movie that is just so much fun, dude. Like it's so goofy. Like it's a weird, like if I want, there's 2 different types of marathons I could do with this. I could like feature this with, like I talked about earlier, with like Fargo, where it's like I could take it as a serious commentary of war with wacky stuff in it, or I could double this with like Airplane and Monty Python Holy Grail, and just accept that it's full on wacky and wild with a backdrop
and wild characters, and like even with like Slim Pickens, like him being from like Blazing Saddles and stuff, like just being like the like even just his like even just like the casual things where he's just like 53rd Niner, coming in for a run, just like the way he's delivering the lines of like this is the guy who's flying the nuclear bomb plane around, like this guy, It's like what?
It's like what is this criteria? Can we check that paperwork? I feel like this guy's an imposter. But no, it's just a lot of fun, and like it just has a lot of like super memorable moments, and like when I can talk about a film and really latch on to like minor details, especially for a 90-minute film, it just knows that it really has a stamp, and it really definitely it's in there, and it's one of those where it's like this, like I said, that score, and then the very end when you actually drop the bomb, and then you have the mushroom cloud and the silhouette, and it kind of just fades into the sunset, like as if like Thanos.
And even with a Stanley Kubrick quote unquote comedy, it still ends with world annihilation. It's still a downer ending. If you think about it, like even in his comedy, it still has
because the commentary in this one is like either it's I feel like the comedy is this, it's so like I say this all the time, like people are like, why are you so happy? I'm like, because honestly, if I'm not laughing, I'm crying, just because of how depressed I could be. And that's kind of like what this is trying to say. It's like if we're taking like this exact type of reaction on face value, this is scary, so you have to laugh or else you're going to be freaked out, you know what I mean? It's kind of like a nervous laughter with like what this movie's going for, like everything with Buck. He's like like, all right, let's go, this is what we gotta do, Daddy's got to go to work, you know what I mean? He's just like, all right, and it's one of those. And then everything with Merc and Muffley, like when he's at the round table or when he's actually talking on the phone with Dimitri, he's just like, all right, like everything's just so nervous, because it's like it's like on pins and needles the entire time, not because of just the Planar situation, but just because of just the concept of war, dude. Like you're either all in like Buck, or you're like, I don't, it's work. This is just the life. You just gotta accept it.
You know what? Not a really non sequitur weird line oddly made me laugh, because I just like weird odd lines. It was when George C. Scott was like accusing the dude of having a camera, and he's like, he could have a camera. He could be taking pictures of our big board. It's just like that.
Oh yeah, he was like Vanna Whiting it.
Our big board. Like I just thought that was really funny. Like just oddly enough, like that's of all the things you're gonna take pictures, not the people. You're worried about your board.
Yeah,
like
the actual the strategies. He's like, boom, that's what we're doing. Like this movie's just it's a lot of fun for me. And like I said, I love everything with Mandrake and Jack D. Ripper, just them going back and forth. And he's on pins and needles the entire time. He's like, oh yeah, I like that too. He's like trying to play along.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, you're going in for a nice shave.
Oh yes, Ripper. My bodily fluids are just as pure as yours. I assure you. My distilled bodily fluids. Yeah, like they're back and forth. It's just like they're having these weird conversations, obviously, while their facility is being stormed and there's gunfire outside and all these things. And
then
talking
Jack's
about
literally like, hold on a second. He's mowing down the things, and then Mandrake's just on the floor, and he's just like, it's like he's love. He's like, all right, this is my fate.
He's more worried about filling him in on water fluoridation being the biggest threat to the world, not nuclear annihilation that's about to happen. Water fluoridation is way more dangerous.
It just showcases it's not always the big picture. There's always some bullshit, underlying thing that, whatever. So Doctor Strangelove is just one of those where it's just wacky and fun. And I have a good time every time I watch. I can put in the background and just, love the score and just, everything they're going in the music, or I can actually sit down and love the comedy. So I hope one day it keeps rising for you, but even if it's it's at the bottom on a positive note, I'll take that.
$100 in rupees, 1 pack of nylon stockings. Another, just like my man could have a hell of a weekend in Vegas.
And by the way, speaking of Darth Vader, James Earl Jones. We
James Earl Jones in a brief thing. He had both Darth Vaders in his movies. No, I get it. All right, so my 4 is one we already talked about, is 2001. And oddly enough, it's one I've watched like 4 times in the last 2 years, just casually. And it might have something to do with when I first got the 4K TV that I had right now. The first thing I popped in was the 4K of 2001 because I was just like, all right, this is going to be my first watch. Why not, right? And I jumped right away to that the cut, like we were talking about, where it first cuts to the space stuff, after the monkey scenes, and just watching it in awe. I'm like, I mean, I get the criticism of there's not a whole lot of characters latched onto or a through line story, so to speak. It's just these set pieces and following, like I said, the technology and the evolution of man and stuff. But I get so wrapped up in the spectacle that it's so overwhelming, that it's so good that I have to I just love this movie just even on that level. It's kind of it's almost like Mad Max Fury Road. People criticize the same thing about that, where it doesn't have a super strong central story, but the spectacle of that movie is so strong that it's so damn good. You just get wrapped up in it and have a great time. I'm the same way with 2001, and I can get something out of it each time. I've listened to a lot of podcasts analyzing this movie and all the stuff from beginning to end that I highly recommend if you're ever digging into it. Just there's so many interpretations and theories about this movie that enhance your watching. You can listen to a podcast or something about that and then rewatch the movie and look for all that stuff, and it's all there, and get something even more out of the movie every time you watch it. I just I like this movie. I love the use of the classical music, the creepy music when they're on the moon with the monolith, all that stuff is just creepy as hell. It's great. So much so they used it in that first trailer for that 2014 Godzilla movie, which I loved when they first did that trailer. Yeah. Go back and watch it. Go back and see the original teaser trailer for the 2014 Godzilla. They used the monolith music from the moon on 2001, and it really works. It's really great. I just dig where this movie goes, and all the stuff with the back and forth with the astronauts and Hal is really great, and where all that stuff goes. I mean, it's hard to be what can I add to the conversation of 2001? It's 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I mean, I get why people don't like it. But I do really, really like it, and I've come to really like it. And some of that actually I attribute to my dad. My dad really loves this movie. He showed it to me at an early age too. I just the first time I really sat down and watched it was in the theater. He watched it casually on cable here and there, and I would catch a little bit of it. But that and all these old war movies that I love are because of him too. So he has a love of sci-fi, and that's kind of where my love of sci-fi comes. So I dig 2001. It's a good time.
Yeah, that's I'll just touch on one thing, how you gave that Mad Max comparison, and the thing I'll just, from my perspective, is I actually do love the story of Mad Max and the goal and the incentive, and
I do too. I hear that criticism a lot, which is weird, to me.
Well, I was just trying to juxtapose why I'm not as high on 2001, whereas I am on my defense, where it's I personally do relate to that story, whereas this one there's technically no story, so that's why, so that's the difference. So I totally understand that this being your 4, and it might affect the overall ranking for the show, but other than
well,
that,
it's that. I think that and Strangelove are going to be the two that are really we'll have to figure out where that range is. But we're not too far off on some of our other ones. We're a couple of notches here and there. So, so we're getting into our top 3 here, right? So we're winding it down here.
I'll start with my number 3 just because you've already talked about it, and that's the Killing. This movie is just we talked about earlier. This movie is just so cool, dude. This is a heist film that takes its time and still doesn't feel long. I mean, it's obviously not long, but if you know, it feel or no, let me rephrase. It's not long, but it's so well deserved and everything that it's going for that every motivation and like point throughout the story just feels earned and deserved and like makes sense of either why they're doing it or why we got the result that we got. Like even the small thing of like when you start the fight just to be a distraction and it's just so fun.
Oh, like, that guy looks like George the Animal Steel or the dude from like Ed Wood, like just mauling these cops, just throwing them all over the place. I was just like,
so
whoa.
Cool. You get a lot of that, like, you know, that physical humor in that. So that's how that's a light moment where it's like this is the heavy film technically for like its seriousness, but that's a nice little moment. You have all the jokes and the teasing of everything with the guy and his wife, and then once you get to that the violence in that's brutal. Like, you know, when like the gunshots and stuff are happening, like you really feel like you kind of get a William H. Macy vibes and Boogie Nights with
Oh yeah.
You know, my
Totally.
wife's got a cock or an ass in her cock. Like it's just like I feel like I could imagine him saying that in this movie because he's just so like, dude, I don't know what to do. And then honestly, one of the fun facts, like the roses, the rose box, that's just so iconic.
Oh, right.
It goes in later, like in Terminator 2, and it's one of those things.
Yeah, no, I definitely reminded me of that. Yeah, when he hides it in the rose box, I was like, oh, okay, so Kubrick was doing that like 40 years earlier than even Terminator. I was like, okay, maybe. Well, hey, James Cameron might be a fan of The Killing. You know what I mean? Like maybe he's a fan of that movie. So I mean, you never know. Like these guys throw in those subtle things to where it's like nobody will get this. It's some obscure movie only I love. You know, like I'll just throw it in there. Tarantino does that a lot in all of his movies. You know, I saw this weird 70s movie I'm doing an homage to in this scene, but nobody will get it except me. But that's fine. You know, like maybe they do that.
And I think what separates like The Killing and Ocean's 11 for me, which are like two movies that like always come into conversation whenever I talk about The Killing, is the fact like The Killing is a faceless thing it's stealing from. Like it's a property, like it's a horse track race, but you're not like stealing from a person, so you're not wasting time dealing with that reasoning. Whereas in like Ocean's 11, you're wasting a lot of time of like building up like Andy Garcia as the bad guy. We're stealing from him. We're stealing from the man. But like, there's really no, you know, you don't really care about that storyline other than the fact like he stole his girl technically. You know what I mean? So like The Killing doesn't have any wasted moments of like hey, it's a horse track. That's what we do. You know what I mean? It's just like in the town, you know what I mean? Like, oh, we're robbing banks or, you know.
It's a big race. They got a lot of money on hand. We're going to rob the place, you know? It's even like in the town when they rob Fenway Park. They're not robbing for a specific guy. Fenway Park's going to have a lot of money and we're going to rob it, you know? Like that's all it is.
And that's what separates that for me. So like whenever I have this conversation, it always comes up, you know, or even like Heat. They're, you know, once again, that's why all those heist movies are above.
We're taking the bank's money, not your money, not specific guy's money. We're just taking the bank's money.
And I love like when you actually have the sit down of like going through the blueprints and going through the plans. And it's like, I feel like of all the heist movies, this is the most intricate in like the plan and like without it being like a montage at the same time too. So it's like Ocean's 11 has the cool style of the montage. This one's like sitting down like, yo, this is the story. This is the plan. This is what we're doing. This is your role. This is your role. This is your role. And then it unfolds when it goes there. And it's like, it's one of the few that actually does that and it works for me. And then, yeah, this movie's just so cool. And like you said, the ending is just top notch because it's one of my favorite endings because like why, you know, I like these types of endings for these types of stories because of I'm a good person. Like, let's just put it that way. I can't root for certain things for, you know, moralistic reasons. And it makes me happy that we end where we end. But the journey was so worth it. And it's still, even though it feels like a kick in the stomach, you don't feel like a piece of garbage at the end because you're like, oh yeah, that's how it should be. Thank you. Oh yeah, I forgot.
Probably, yeah. They're still breaking the law. They're felons at this point. They're people have died during this thing. They're not good people. There's been shootouts. There's been this. But you're still like, even then, all those movies are still a party that's like, I kind of want them to get away just because, you know, they almost got there. You know, they're so close. You know, you almost want it, but you know, it is what it is. But yeah, no, I could definitely see myself. I'm definitely going to go back to this movie at some point because it's one of the better, especially old school kind of heist movies. It's definitely better than I don't know if you've seen the original Ocean's 11 with like Frank Sinatra and stuff. That movie's still a shit. This movie's definitely better than that. So I will definitely say that if you've never seen that. But I like The Killing too. I just it was a first time watch for me. So and I know it's not for you. So it's just one of those things. Absolutely. It's going to take some time with it, but I still liked it.
All right.
So my number three.
We're in the
my number three is a Clockwork Orange. It's God. I just love how fucking weird this movie is, man. I'm just all in on it every time I watch it. Like from the opening, you know, the score is wonderful. Like just how unconventional it is. There's just always something to look at in this movie. Like the set design is just so weird. Of just like, you know, you could just stop this movie at any given point and be like, look how weird that chair is. Like look at that weird painting on the wall. You know, look at that weird, you know, piece of you know, that weird statue on the bookshelf. You know, like there's always just something to look at in this world that they set up. But like you said, you just have to accept that like this is the world that's being presented in Stanley Kubrick's brain for this movie. So you just got to like roll with it. Like you can't be like, oh, why does this really make sense? Like, what about this? Like that's just weird. Why is there a milk bar? Because there just fucking is. There's a milk bar. You know, you just have to roll with it. Why are there these gangs that, you know, dress the same? I don't know. Why are they like that in the Warriors? Because they just are. You know, there's just all these gangs that have a theme. Like they just do. But yeah, like I really like the 3-act structure in this movie. And like you said, with you were talking about that 60-40 thing earlier, it's like you can be either the movie presents of like you can sort of be with Alex and be with against him at the same time, you know, because you can be with the whole thing of like on the prison side where it's like, no, this guy's a murderer, like he's a brutal dude, like he needs to be like punished, he needs to be in jail. But you can also, when he's got obviously the iconic scene where he's got the shit in his eyes, like, and they're prying his eyes, you can be like, okay, I wouldn't really wish that on damn near anybody, you know, like that's horrifying. You know, like even on some of my worst enemies, like,
and now you have
like
the gag
shit that they're
reflex
putting it through.
to Beethoven.
Yeah,
it's like that's brutal.
Mm-hmm. It's brutal, yeah, because he genuinely enjoys like classical music and shit, like, and you know, it's one of those things. But yeah, so you can see both sides where you can be disgusted by certain things, but be, you know, with him on certain things, and see both sides. But yeah, it's just a really fascinating character study. And for me, my top 3 movies to me all have performances in them that I think are all-time great acting performances in movie history. And I think Malcolm McDowell in this movie is so fucking good. Like he carries this movie, but in that way of just like, even on just the more like just standard scenes, the way he's just going, yes sir, no sir, you know,
think about it, he's 16 years old, like he's a kid.
Oh my god,
like,
yeah, he's so young, and he just absolutely destroys in this movie. He's so good. Like it's just an all-time great performance, an all-time great, just like sci-fi dystopian weird movie. I can just go back to this movie and just get totally wrapped up in this world. And like I said, just even looking at stuff in this movie and listening to the music, like just, you know, I there's always something, I get something new out of this movie every time I watch it, and I just dig how trippy this movie is. It's just so interesting to watch. I don't know if I'd say fun, because there are definitely like crazy things in this movie, but like there are fun moments, like as horrifying it is, like when they're walking into you know, to fight that other gang, and they're literally like, it's brutal, they're about to like rape this girl, like, but you know, but the narration comes on and he's like, and old boy was about to give her the old in out, like you kind of laugh, like that's a funny line. You know, like you don't want to laugh, but it's funny. And like, and then they just have this like it's an awkward laugh, but like it's a funny line. And then they're going around having these fights. I mean, they're bad dudes. When he slams him in the balls with the stick and just like kicks him into the water, like that stuff is funny. Like there's funny moments of like that dark humor. You know, and yeah, even the dude in the wheelchair, like his delivery of the lines, what happened, it was horrible when he's just like, you know, no, she did. You know, I kind of laughed, like, and it's funny in a way.
The first time he has that scene when he freaks out, he looks like Danny the first time that The Shining takes over.
Oh yeah. Oh.
Like, dude, are you coming? Like,
I could listen to that guy talk about, try the wine, you know, just
have some more.
yeah. Food, all right. Like just every line he's delivering is so good.
Spaghetti, and it's just like,
oh yeah, there's funny stuff in this. Like this movie has a weird sense of humor too, but like, yeah, I mean, it's horrifying, it's disturbing, it's funny, it's violent, it's everything you could want out of a 70s movie. That's why I love a lot of 70s movies. They're just, the filmmakers were so just like daring and like just turning Hollywood upside down, just making like crazy movies and like turning conventional Hollywood into unconventional Hollywood. So, and this is like a prime example of that in 1971. So, yeah, I really like Clockwork Orange. It's great. Like I said, these 3 are like, at any given day, they could probably switch. They're all in my top 100. You know what I mean? So they could switch in that order and on that, whatever I'm in the mood for in any given day. But yeah, Clockwork Orange is a banger. It's great.
Like I said, my 1 through 5, which ends at Clockwork Orange,
Yeah.
or if not top 100, borderline.
Oh yeah, like they're right there.
They've been day one. They've been day one favorites for a long time.
I've been a fan of this movie ever since I first really sat down and watched it on like Blu-ray. Like I have it on 4K now, but like when I first sat down and watched it, I was all in, man. Like, and I've watched it. I watch it a lot now. Like I just put it on a lot, and it's really great. So yeah, Clockwork Orange is my number 3.
All right, so I'm going to. I have a prediction that we have the same 1 and 2 in the same order. Like, is that safe?
We might, yeah. I think because you sent me your updated top 100, and I saw one movie that was very high up, and I was like, well, that's also my number 1. So I'm predicting that we have the same one. So, do we both have Full Metal Jacket at number 2?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. So let's just talk about it. Okay.
All right. So Full Metal Jacket. I want to get this out of the way now.
Mm-hmm.
Is an amazing movie from start to finish. I hate the blasphemy.
I like the whole movie. I love the whole movie. Yes.
The people that say that it's a first half only movie does not get the commentary of the second half. Like it literally goes into the second half where he has a Born to Kill sticker
with a peace sign on his thing.
Yeah. It's literally about contradiction, and it's like he's literally going into Vietnam, into the shit to report and to be like tell the news, like the commentary. Like imagine not Dreyfus, but the other guy for Apocalypse Now. Oh my god, I always forget. But anyway,
Robert Duvall or
no, the reporter. Exactly. Well, anyway, that guy.
I know you're talking about. Anyways,
that guy. Where it's like that. Imagine that's in a serious, full on serious like horror war, and this one is more of a commentary of the war, and it's the same concept from his POV. I mean, it literally it jumps to the second. Obviously, we're going to talk about the first half later, but I'm kind of skipping so we can no. So we're going into the second half of like it opens up with them like, oh, me so horny, I love you long time. Go on, $10 off. They're trying to like bargain and like have sex.
Yeah, right.
Like, show the light, the side stuff of war, because obviously the war, it's not a war movie, it's a commentary of Vietnam, the experience, you know what I mean? And like obviously you lead up to it, everything that you put you through in the first one, now how does that carry over into the later? And the last thing I'll really jump in until we really start talking about the whole movie, but the Mickey Mouse chant at the very end is just one of the most things that just gives me chills, because it's such an amazing metaphor of like, dude, these are kids. These are kids that were forced to go to war. So when they are trying to band together, their instinct is to sing the Mickey Mouse
children's songs.
Yes.
Yeah, it's weird.
M-I-C, K-E-Y-M-O-U-S-E. It's like one of those things that's like, hey, and then like and everything with the girl and how they were able to like go back and forth of like what to do with her. Do we save her? Do we kill her? And it kind of, there's a scene like that, that kind of, is in the turning point in Lone Survivor of a true story there, where it's like, hey, if we kill these guys now, it's fucked up, but that's war, that's our job. But if we don't, who knows what's going to happen? And clearly the true story, they let them go, and then boom, they get fucked up because of it. It's one of those things like Full Metal Jacket.
And even those arguments where like the one guy is like, you haven't been in the shit, I've been in the shit. Like you haven't seen the shit, I've seen. Like they're arguing over who's seen more fucked up things over there, which is like horrifying to think about. You know what I mean? They're arguing over like who's seen more mutilated bodies or who's killed more people or like whatever. Like that's what they're arguing over.
It's an ironic thing of like overcompensating the machismo. I mean, one of the guys' name is literally Animal Mother. Like it's like he's like trying to like
Baldwin.
It's like he's really just trying to be like the
macho.
And it's like that's what this movie represents. So like obviously we lead into the beginning of the movie of just going through R. Lee Ermey, like you said, all-time performance.
All-time are great. And everybody knows the story. He was a real like drill sergeant, like and it shows obviously. And he's one of those few guys who told Kubrick, he was like, no, you follow me. Like I will do my thing and you just follow me with the damn camera. And like, I'm not even going to go by your script. Like I'm going to do what I do, what I would have done in like a real boot camp. You know what I mean? You just like point and shoot. And like, he's one of the few guys to ever like do that. And that's why him and Kubrick were, I think, friends like till his death, because like he kind of respected that of just like, no, he's like, I know what I need to do to make this real. Like you want to make this real, like I will make this real. Like you want real war shit, like I'll give you real war shit. And like, and that comes through in the performance. Like you buy every single line, every single second, and he is like, I know we overuse the word iconic, but he is iconic. Like, he is the face of like drill sergeant, military, like, we're turning you into a killing machine. You know what I mean? But like, he's so good, like, in everything he does. Like, I mean, I know it's been like almost overpraised at this point, but like I'll praise it again. Like, Army of the Army is like this character of Sergeant Hartman is one of the greatest characters, like I said.
And that's why I wanted to start off talking about the second half, because I never, the first half always overshadows the second half for the masses, and it shouldn't be, because this movie is it's essentially Kill Bill Volume 1 and Kill Bill Volume 2. Everyone's like, oh, Kill Bill Volume 1's amazing, and then Kill Bill Volume 2, the story.
I love Kill Bill Volume 2.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love the story part and the follow up.
Same thing.
Yeah.
It's essentially Full Metal Jacket Volume 1, Full Metal Jacket Volume 2. Put them together, you have the whole bloody affair. You have the Vietnam War. You know what I mean? Like, that's what we're doing here. You know what I mean? So every like all the iconic lines, 5'9". I know they stack shit high. I'm gonna call you Private Snowball. Yeah. He's like, choke
what's your name?
With my hand, numbnuts.
What's your name, fat buddy? You know, just little quick lines like that. What's your name, fat buddy? You know, I mean, I do the thing all the time.
Jesus H. Christ, a jelly donut. Like
I opened up with it on the Tier Ranker fight last night when Jordan brought me on, and I go, Jordan, let me see your war face. Blah, blah.
That's not a war face. That's a war face. I'll take you home and then bring you over and fuck my sister. Like,
my sister.
Jesus Christ,
come home, fuck my sister. He's a savage, man. He's great. He's so good. But again, that's all shit he would do in real military. I mean, that's what those guys do.
I mean, obviously, I can't repeat all the lines. He's like, I don't care if you're this, that, and the other.
You're all equally worthless. Like, you're all equally worthless.
And it's like he opens it up. He's like, hey, this is what we're doing. You're gonna accept it or fuck you, and you know, get out. You know what I mean? And it's one of those where it's like, you know, I mean, it's essentially like Alec Baldwin's character in Glengarry Glen Ross. If you can't handle this, how are you gonna take what you get out on the stick? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, if you can't handle it, you call this abuse, you son of a bitch. And that's the same thing. Like, if you can't handle, you know, your boss yelling at you, then how are you going to handle the enemy, Charlie, yelling at you, essentially? You know what I mean? And it's one of those where, dude, it sets it up great. And obviously we have the dynamic of Matthew Modine's character, which he does carry over into the second, Private Joker. You know, what's the actual line he says, the John Wayne line? Pilgrim. Oh, I'm Pilgrim or whatever.
Oh, I'm Pilgrim.
Who fucks that? Oh, you're
who's the son of a bitch who just signed his own death warrant? You know, step forward. Yeah.
And then so deal with everything with Matthew Modine's character, and then you obviously have Vincent D'Onofrio, Private Pile. And it's one of those where it's like, I mean, he named a Pile, you know, Gomer Pyle. That's what he's going after. You know what I mean? It's like he's literally just, you know, the abuse and just, you know, the fucking the soap. Dude, with the pillowcase, and they're just beating the shit out of him, dude. Oh my god, you feel that when you watch that, and then the score.
Do you suck dicks? I just had to throw that in. He looks like he sucked a golf ball out of a garden hose.
Like, you don't have the common courtesy to give him a reach around. Like,
reach around. It's so quotable.
The movie is just it's like obviously you know, everything, the quotable stuff and the first thing you think of is all of that stuff. But yes, this movie is a full movie, and it's not long, dude. It's under 2 hours. Like, it's another one where it's like it goes.
Yeah.
Like, Kubrick he's on a mission, and he tells a story, dude. Full Metal Jacket is just so awesome, and I love it. I've always loved it, and for obviously the comedy, which is sad comedy because we're laughing our ass off, but like, there's some fucked up shit. And then, you know, everything.
Dude, the first time I saw this movie all the way through, and the scene where it's like dark with like the music, and they hit him with the soap socks like over and over again, and like I feel his pain. Where he's crying, just you know, like you feel his pain. Like, it's a really disturbing scene. Like, that scene like really got to me. And then when you see him the next day and just his performance in his eyes, you see that like something has turned, like something clicked
the camera,
on. You know,
literally opens up his eyes and he's lost. He's essentially obviously, you know, we're spoiling it, you know, later. We already know our number one, but like, he's Jack Torrance at that point. That's when the hotel took him over. That's when the PTSD has the fact that he's already got PTSD and he's still in boot camp is fucking crazy. And that's what shows like it's not even about his mental capacity that like they broke him. There's a difference. He didn't break because he's weak. They broke him because the system, you know, pushed him too far. You know what I mean? Sometimes, and it's because he didn't sign up for this. They were drafted, or, you know, however the approach. You know what I mean? One of those like, dude, just let him fucking go home. Clearly, he doesn't need to be, you know, let him go, dude. But and it also sets up like you're rooting for him. Like, I've watched actual like movie reactions, like on YouTube. I've watched a few movie reaction channels where they watch movies and they watch it live, whether for the first time or rewatch. And like lot of the times they're rooting for him, like, hey, oh no, get up, come on, go over it, and then he starts falling, like, oh no, and it's like you really feel for it because like he's a real developed character, and it's
when Hartman's like, we may have found something you're good at, Private Pile, when he's doing the shooting, like, and he's actually like doing pretty good at the shooting and shit, and when he's like, you know, when he's like, infantry, you made it, you know, whatever, like, but at that point again, he's already gone, like he's just going through the motions, but even that's like fascinating. And I know, the first half of this movie gets talked about a lot, but I feel like if people haven't gone back and watched the second half in a long time, and again watch the whole movie start to finish and see the follow up of like where he's commentating on where the carryover of that into actual war, and like you know, you need that follow up like to see, and it's just
the different
good.
personalities
like
that it creates, the war machines, the fearful child, the kind of like the both sides of not knowing where they're going to be, the hesitation, you know what I mean? Like there's still so many layers to this of that people just underestimate, and like that's why honestly, it's as wild as this sounds, because it's one of the most famous. I still feel like this movie is super underrated just as a whole film, because people just I don't want to say overrate the first half, but they underrate the second half so much that it's like in people's eyes, they feel like the movie as a whole is overrated, which is ironic because I'm saying it's underrated because they're not appreciating the whole. And it's a weird appreciation. Like whenever this movie comes up, you hardly ever get a full start to finish conversation of the movie. It's just the first half, and people are like, oh yeah, I forgot there's a second half, or I just turn it off after that. But fuck off.
Even visually, dude, the second half, like those the cinematography of the second half, dude, like all the fire at the end, like when it's they're marching in front of the fires and stuff, like it's gorgeous. Like it is. I would just, even on a visual standpoint, it's incredible. Like filmmaking and all that stuff, and the way the battles are laid out when those dudes are getting hit like by the sniper at the end, and just the kind of pseudo slow motion, just boom, 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 you know. Like, like all that shit is like, I think some of it that it's even better in stuff like Platoon, you know what I mean? Which I'm not high on Platoon, but I think stuff like that is even done better in this movie. Like honestly,
and I also feel like that scene's great too, because you know they have the entire like everyone's fighting of like who's tougher, who's better, who knows more stuff. But when you actually now we're all in the shit, we're a team. Let's fucking go. You know what I mean? You have the one guy that like he rushes in to like set it off, but at that point, as they're a team still, you know, they're like, all right, fuck, you know, shit, now we're starting, but like now we're like, boom,
Animal Mother, he's a dick, but like in a fight, you want that guy on your side because like he's a bad motherfucker. Like
he might not have the best approach, but he's got good tactics. Yeah,
right. But he's also that guy who will lead the charge. You know what I mean? When nobody else will. Like he doesn't like he'll go in and
he'll rip
go
that Band-Aid off, and he'll get it started. And at the end of the day, if you won, it's because he sparked that flame. And now obviously you let your training come into play and fully bring it together. But yes, Full Metal Jacket. If you've never seen the second half for some reason, which I wouldn't be surprised that there are people out there that probably never have actually seen the second half, but are familiar with the first, whether it's YouTube clips or just stopping it for some reason, or if you have not rewatched it because you're like, oh, it's one-sided, I promise you, go in, especially if you're a film lover, go in and actually pay attention to the commentary, the stories, and realize of the end of that film with that Mickey Mouse march of like what that represents. And I swear to God, dude, it's going to hit you way more than you would ever imagine going in. It's powerful. But yeah, I mean, if you know us, anyone who knows, you as the horror guy and just any conversation, when you think of Stanley Kubrick,
he made a horror movie. He made a damn good horror movie, and I have to give it credit because goddamn, The Shining is fucking great. And like, you know what? And like you said, maybe it's cliche because it's the big horror movie, the big Stephen King adaptation. But I don't give a shit because The Shining fucking rules because The Shining is great, and it's
the difference. And like this is a common theme of everything I'm talking about. This movie's long, but there's so many drawn out scenes, but you're descending into madness. Like you literally need to have those close-ups on Jack Nicholson's
You have to feel the cabin fever with the characters, and cabin fever sets in over a long period of time. We just had a period where half the country was like locked down. There was a lot of stuff shut down. People were feeling that shit of like cabin fever of like not being able to go out and do stuff. Like you have to feel that with the characters, which is why that stuff is drawn out and set up the way it is. You have to feel what they're feeling, stuck in this place and going crazy, like going mad. Like that's the idea.
And you have to you have to set up the relationship between Jack and Wendy and Danny, Jack and Danny, and you have to set up the relationship between Jack and the Overlook, Wendy and the Overlook, Danny and the Overlook. Like there's multiple
Danny and Dick Halloran's connection
Yep.
with like The Shining. You have to set that up, like at the table.
It's just there's so much that goes on that it doesn't fully explain The Shining, but it does enough that you're never confused. You just it tells you just enough that like, hey, now this is what we're doing. Because if you it's like it's essentially The Shining is Matrix 1, but it could have teetered into like Matrix 2 and 3 territory of just over explaining. Yeah, you know what I mean? And it didn't, and it did a great job of that. And it's one of those things where like I've actually, well, I didn't read it, but I listened to it. But I've read essentially the Shining book, and it is, I wouldn't say vastly different, but there are enough differences in the book and this that make this feel like its own thing. While it's essentially The Shining inspired by the book, because I mean it's not even like as wild as the book.
There's enough different to where Stephen King hates this movie and prefers the Steven Weber TV miniseries from 1998, which is technically more accurate, but nobody else agrees but him that that's a better movie. So yeah I mean, that's what we talk about. Like when you're adapting a book, you're not making a book, you're making a movie. So sometimes you have to change things to what's going to be the better
and film. Also why would you want to do just a carbon copy, or especially it's like the same thing with remakes. Like the whole point of you adapting something or remaking or setting, because you're making
to put your spin on it.
And Kubrick does that, dude. Like he sets that up. Like so many shots of this where it just has the flyovers. Whether I don't know if they're probably on a helicopter. It's always my assumption.
Yeah, it's on a helicopter.
Assume it's a helicopter. But like when you're just going through and just that score, and it's just like it sets that tone. Like it gives you chills, dude. This movie is so cold. Like you're watching this movie.
Literally, it's cold. It's a cold movie. It's a great one to watch. And this and The Hateful Eight are great ones to watch in winter. They just feel cold. Both of these movies just feel like you, even if it's hot outside, you just like you feel chilly watching the movie. Yeah, with them snowed in and everything. And it's the fact that this movie has and all the deliberate choices that are made, even just with the set design and stuff. People have literally made, there's that Room 237 documentary. There's people have been made all these long essays and literally made dissertations about this movie of what it's trying to say. The set design of like even the designs of the carpet, like the fact that there's weird stuff in this movie where the layout of the hotel doesn't make any sense. The guy's office who owns the hotel should not have a window there because it's like facing a like a mountain. It shouldn't have a window there, but it does. The fact that he's watching TV at one point, there's no cords coming from the back of the TV. Like there's weird stuff of like that you can dig into, like what the choices he made are completely deliberate. They're not like continuity errors. These are deliberate things of like what he chooses to make you think of, like to trip you out, to add into that like weirdness of this place and how it can take over your mind. And maybe their minds are like screwed up to where, they're not seeing, the things and the layout in their heads are changing. They're turning in circles, walking around this hotel. Like they're losing the layout themselves. Of like wandering around. How did Jack get out of the freezer that was locked? Like we don't really know. It's not really totally explained. Like, did some ghost did it? Like, was he ever in there in the first place? Really? Like, I don't know. We have no idea. Like, there's weird things that are deliberately left for your interpretation.
It could even be one of those things where it's as simple as like Wendy never actually locked him in, and like he's fighting his own demons. Like he's like, I can't get out of here until I promise myself that I'm gonna do what I need to do. I promise it. Oh, door's open. You know what I mean? It's one of those, maybe he tricked himself into like, that's how he, there's so many ways you can interpret this, everything with Grady. And it's like, he's like, oh, you've always been the caretaker, and just all these weird things. You have the picture at the end. You have, just, I mean, the actual maze itself, outside that's beautiful, chilling. It's just, this movie is just wild, dude. And it's a ride. Like the Shining could be a ride, and it's, like I said, it's one of those ones where this is where the length is fully, it makes so much sense because you really are just you're like you said, it's literally cabin fever, and the Shining is just fantastic. Jack Nicholson is an all-time performance, obviously. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brain.
I'm just gonna bash you right the fuck in. Yeah, he's so good. Like, I could literally like run that monologue down like start to finish. He does on the stairs. Like, it's so good. So when I'm in here, I'm working. Like just the freak out that he has. It means you don't fucking bother me. Fuck out of here. Yeah, he's just but it's all these, again, it's slow because he starts with just the couple of snippy things like here and there, and it like slowly escalates, and like
even before then, the backstory of like him being a drunk and him like pulling Danny But it sets it up. It does a great job where it sets up where it's like he has the temper, but Danny had to push him to that, where it's like Danny's fucking with his papers on stuff and he's got a deadline stuff, so he's just trying to yank him up. So obviously his temper is what did it, but Danny set it up. Whereas later in the movie they do nothing wrong and he's full on overcome. So it showed that like he's susceptible to the Overlook, but he's not full on evil at the beginning, and then he finally gets taken over. So everything that he's doing at the end is like, boom, that's not even Jack anymore, that's the Overlook, you know what I mean? Or that's the spirits within the old Jack Grady, however you want to interpret it. At that point he's fully taken over. That's hereditary. That's when the spirit's inside him now at that point, you know what I mean? Like he's not him anymore.
There's just such weird imagery in the movie. Like the twin girls are creepy, you know, just coming out of nowhere. They're just there, you know, come play with us, Danny, you know, like that stuff. Like I always forget about the shot when Wendy's running from Jack and she turns the corner and randomly there's two dudes in furry costumes and one is filleting the other. Like what the fuck? Like where did that come from? Like
my theory of that is at that point she is even it's gotten to a point where she's even
she's seeing things. She's starting to go crazy.
You know, because now at that point she is so like because she's been being strong for Danny, but now she's so overly vulnerable that she's starting to become susceptible to it. That she's just starting to see visions. Well, if you think about it, that's what Danny started at the beginning with The Shining. That's what Jack started. You know what I mean? So that was just her level 1 of it, and it got to a point where even her, who was supposed to be our quote unquote final girl, you know what I mean? Even her, she was starting to get tempted or, you know, starting to be susceptible to it. So it's like, that's how powerful the Overlook is. And it's one of those things like when we revisit in Dr. Sleep, it's like this, how you feel about that third act in Dr. Sleep is because what sets up in The Shining. Like Mike Flanagan does a great job of paying homage, but also he does a great job of like kind of like making a sequel, but also kind of a reboot, like in it, telling it in his own way and or expanding on the story, I guess, in a way. You know what I mean? It's like it's so cool. It's like the way that they're able to like connect with each other. And it's like, because of my love for this movie, I'm able to appreciate Dr. Sleep. I feel like, or people, I honestly, it's one of those things like when you hear people like they like Dr. Sleep and don't like The Shining, I think that's weird.
It's odd. I feel like, it's very strange.
Like it's like a good puzzle piece that goes together. Like I'm not, one doesn't need I guess Dr. Sleep technically does need The Shining, but I feel like they just go together. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, it's a nice companion piece. But The Shining, like I said, the score, the performances, the visuals, the creepy dynamic that it sets, the tone, just the theories that it makes you think about it. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's not cut and dry. It's weird and it's fun and it's scary. It's creepy. It's an all-timer, dude. The Shining.
Oh yeah, it's. I mean, you know, I think it's an all-time top 5 horror movie for me. Just horror movies in general. And like obviously, you know me, I'm a horror guy. So like Kubrick made a banger of a horror movie, so it's got to be number 1, you know, for me because I love horror. But this one rules. Just on a more personal note, I got to meet one of the cast members of this at a horror convention one time in Orlando. I met Joe Turkel, who plays Lloyd the bartender. I like you, Lloyd. How's my credit here? Your credit's perfectly fine, you know, Mr. Torrance. And like he had a setup actually. His like table was an actual like bar, like a recreation of the Shining bar, and like it was like you could take pictures of him like behind the bar, and like he wrote on my 8x10 like, "Your money's no good here, Mr. Howell." Like it was just awesome. Like he was a sweet dude. And he told like he wrote a book about working like mainly about like Stanley Kubrick as a director. Like he wrote a whole book about it, so that's out there if you ever want to like read it and hear about like his you know style of directing and shit like that. But yeah, just on a personal side note, I got to meet Joe Turkel and he's a sweetheart. But yeah, Lloyd, I like.
Well, I hope you never told him how much you hate Blade Runner then, because
yeah, no, and again, I don't hate Blade Runner. I just don't get Blade Runner. I'm not there with Blade Runner. I just don't get it yet. I'm waiting for it. I'm still waiting for it to click. I'm waiting for it.
Yeah, that's a good one that we could watch together. That where it's like, all right, let's just maybe.
Well, maybe that would help me. That would help me finish the movie because I seem to fall asleep every time I watch it. So maybe that would help me, like if we watch it together, actually get to the beginning to end. So I don't hate Blade Runner because I like sci-fi. I like the look of the movie. I like the feel of the movie. I just can't get through. I don't know. It just doesn't click for me. So that's a whole other story for another topic. Yep. But
all right.
Yeah,
so
I don't hate it. I just don't get it. I just don't get it.
Any last things you want to touch on The Shining?
No, I mean, The Shining is The Shining. There's not a whole lot I can add. It's great from start to finish. It looks great in 4K. Pick it up in 4K. That's the last thing I'll say. Much like a lot of these movies, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, Clockwork Orange, his movies look amazing in 4K. Obviously, the dude had an eye for cinema. He makes a great looking movie.
That's what shows that it's not even just about the camera quality. It's about the camera work, and that's what Kubrick can't be.
Dude, the scenes when even the stuff where you're following Danny as he's on the little trike, like all throughout the hotel, like swinging on off the rug. Yeah, like even that stuff is so good.
That's why I'm okay with this movie being 2.5 hours. Scenes like that, that is just so, like, the fact that we're even talking about that type of shit, where it's like that could be a meandering, pointless thing. No, or just Jack just throwing the tennis ball, him killing time, and then you find out that he's sitting there typing, and then you find all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Jack a dull boy.
Like that, where it's like, dude, the fact that papers.
But the trike thing pays off because eventually he turns a corner and all of a sudden those two creepy ass twin girls are there just out of nowhere, and then like it takes a turn for him. It's great.
And then the scene, and then they're chopped up and all that stuff. And it's like
the flashes to the blood and the flashes to this and the flash, and he's freaking out. Like, I mean, again, that stuff pays up. That stuff pays off, man. Like
the elevator, the blood, dude, it's fucking All right, all right, so. That is Stanley Kubrick.
So oddly enough, some of our lower ones and the top ones are going to be very similar. It's, again, like usual, or sometimes like it is our middle ones thing. But it's one of those things. I feel like we either have shows where they're complete opposites. Like all the stuff you have at the bottom, I have at the top. And vice versa. And then like sometimes we match on like the top and the bottom, but we have like mixed in the middle. So
what I've noticed is the most prestige directors where we always meet at the top and bottom, and in the middle is where it's the ones with the random directors where it's like, that could just be whatever, because that's why we picked the random for that reason. But the Nolans, the Tarantino, PTA even, like that's when we're like, all right, we're pretty on a similar page. But I want this is the first time I want to do this. I feel like this is a fun time. What do you think our number 11 is?
I wonder. Barry Lyndon, maybe. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
All right. Now we got that out of the way. What do you think our number 10 is?
Lolita.
Close.
Spartacus. Okay, that's what I almost said. I said either Spartacus or Lolita just because we both had them on the lower end, but not exactly number 10. So I figured maybe the averages might work that way. Okay. Gotcha.
So Lolita's our number 9. What do you think our number 8 is?
Paths of Glory or Eyes Wide Shut?
Eyes Wide Shut.
Okay, there we go. Eyes Wide Shut. Okay.
All right. Top 7. What do you think's number 7?
The Killing.
Nope. I'll give you 2 guesses because after that it's just gonna go on.
2001.
Dr. Strangelove.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe you wanted to skew that one a little bit higher.
I'm fair with it. You brought it down.
Okay.
You brought it down. Number 6 is
okay. I thought it'd be Paths of Glory because we both matched around the same time. Okay, gotcha.
Those are the 2. That's where we those are the movies where we were opposite, and that's where they brought down. And then now we get into the averages. Paths of Glory actually jumped those just because we were more middle on it. Number 4.
Killing.
I feel like, that's at this point it's pretty obvious. The Killing is at number 4.
It's got to be Clockwork, Metal, and Shining.
Metal,
yeah.
Yep.
All right.
And it's one of those where it's like, I feel like that's if not even. I feel like if we did a show, like if we did a companion piece where we did like a Watch Mojo type of show, I would feel like that's a respectable list. Like at number 11, we have Barry Lyndon. At number 10, Spartacus. At number 9, Lolita.
Yeah.
At number 8, Eyes Wide Shut. At number 7, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Stopped Worrying and Learned to Love the Bomb. Number 6, 2001: A Space Odyssey, which that one might be the controversial one technically.
Borat, Cultural Learnings of America for Make Benefit, Glorious Nation of Kazakhstan.
At number 5, Paths of Glory. At number 4, The Killing.
Why did I memorize it a long time ago? I don't know, because I thought it might come up in trivia someday.
Clockwork Orange. At number 2, Full Metal Jacket. And our number 1 Stanley Kubrick movie of all time is The Shining.
The Shining.
All right, our longest episode yet for much. It's totally fine. I mean, it makes the most sense. Our longest episode is going to be
Kubrick. Come on, yeah. It's a meaty filmography. You got it. You can't be like, 2 minutes on each movie. Okay, number 11, Barry Lyndon, Dr. Strange. Yeah, it's just like you got to dig into these
because
movies a little bit,
we that shows the respect of like this filmography and just this collection of films of like, yo, even the ones that we're not high on, we still have a lot to say. You know what I mean? Because that's what showcases. Like regardless of how you feel about these films, there's a conversation to be had about all 11, and that's what makes Kubrick a goat. You know what I mean? He's an S tier director for a reason. Like he's there, dude. Like he's dense. He's really hard to answer trivia questions about because there's so much crap that you could ask him.
Right.
I regret it every time I make it a strength, but I genuinely love it. Like we just had a legit 2-hour conversation, and at no point would you ever doubt my love of Kubrick. But he's fucking hard to answer trivia questions for. It's like, God damn it.
Yeah.
I want to.
I would want to also, but only if it was like because I just watched all these movies, so they're like fresh in my head.
Or it's like just took random notes, and now I can actually study the deep stuff. But if it's just based on memory, fuck, dude, there's so much that I'm like, no, I didn't know that. What do we have planned for next week?
Well, just as prestigious, I would say, as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, as these Stanley Kubrick movies. But no, so we went so heavy on this one. Again, we're kind of blow off with something a little breezier, something we can have just a little fun with, and talk about maybe some really good movies. Some of the high ones are the highs for me, like really high for me in that series, but the lows are pretty low. So like we'll talk about that as far as that goes. But I'm looking forward to I think we did the Saw franchise with the first horror one we kind of tackled because we just are both fanboys of the Saw franchise. I definitely like these movies a lot. Even the bad ones are interesting to me, like so we could talk about it, just in the world building. So we'll talk about Arlie Ermey again, that's for sure, because he's in 2 of those movies. And let's just say he's the best part of some of those movies. I'll say that. So he's the man. So we'll talk about that just to kind of.
The 3 new, like the 3 second series of like the new era. And then the 2 new ones. So was that 9?
So there's 4. There's the then we jumped to the remake and Texas Chainsaw the beginning. Then we had Texas Chainsaw 3D, Leatherface, and the newest Netflix one.
So I think that 9.
Yep. And a timeline that's more convoluted than the Halloween timeline at this point, as far as the choose your own adventure aspect of what goes where. I'm sure we'll talk about it next week, but it's even more convoluted than Halloween. At this point with the number of reboots and sequels to reboots and sequels to remakes and et cetera, et cetera. But we'll talk about that, and I might have some surprising rankings. I'll tell you that. There's some ones I'm high on that nobody else on the internet is high on. I can almost guarantee you that. So we'll talk about it.
All I have to do is I did watch 2. I won't say anything about it, but I did watch 2 because I wanted to make sure I got that one before it was ineligible to
left streaming.
So all I have to finish is 3, 4, 3D, and Leatherface. So I only have to watch 4, and
I've seen. I'm pretty good on all. I have to rewatch Texas Chainsaw Massacre the beginning. I haven't seen that one since the theater. Texas Chainsaw 3D I have not seen since the theater. I've seen them all. I have not revisited since I saw them initially. Leatherface I need to watch, but the new Netflix one I watched about 2 months ago, so I'm pretty good on that one. The remake I'm pretty high on, so I'm pretty good on that. And I'm gonna rewatch the original third, Leatherface. Texas Chainsaw 3, I like that one, but it's like I just need to rewatch that one. So when I at least remember like the details of, so I need to go back to that one. It should be an interesting one. We'll talk about the convoluted timelines and the worlds that they set up and all the different iterations. But I'm a Tobe Hooper fan, so I'm excited to talk some Tobe Hooper, with this because especially with that original movie. So original 2 movies really. I know Texas Chainsaw 2 is Toby, and people either love it or hate it. We'll talk about it. I'm interested to see whether you liked it or not, because that movie's very divisive. We had to do it mainly because Texas Chainsaw 2 is like on Tubi right now, but it's weirdly hard to find. Like even on physical media, it's like very hard to find. I have an old DVD, but it's hard to find. So we'll do that, and then behind the scenes, we might hash out our next couple weeks and let you guys know what's coming up. After we hash out a few more behind the scenes kind of scheduling. We'll start with that and just kind of blow it off, do something a little breezier. Horror franchises are fun to kind of dig into. We're not going to do them all the time, obviously, just like once every 2 months or so, we'll dig into a horror franchise and dig into those movies. But looking forward to it.
There you go. All right, so if you're watching this on the live, I obviously appreciate you. I shout out Steven Shepard. I know if he wasn't watching the entire time, he was definitely in and out for the most. So I appreciate you. Anyone else who's watched live, appreciate you. If you missed the ranking, just go back a couple. We did a recap of our 1 through 11s. And if you're watching this on the repeat because you just searched Stanley Kubrick, comment below your rankings. I'd love to see it. Make sure you check out the rest of our shows. Every Wednesday we'll be live ranking stuff. We've already done director filmographies like Tarantino, Fincher, PTA, Del Toro,
Nolan, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, all the
Rocky,
Rambo, Rambo, all kinds of stuff. Yeah,
and now we're trying to dip into some more broader, weirder stuff like I don't know, Mummy versus Indiana Jones, or Harold Kumar
versus Friday.
We try and have some fun with this and kind of stand out and really develop ourselves what we're doing. So if you're watching this for the first time, check out the channel on Mondays. I also do a horror podcast with John Marr. I know Austin doesn't like that, but we've already
I'm enjoying it. I'm just, again, like I said, just as long as we can do some horror on here every now and then, I'm cool with it. We dig into a franchise every now and then, just so I can scratch my horror itch every now and then. It's fun. But I will say, if you guys ever do anything Body Snatchers related, you got to have me on, because I love Body Snatchers. Anything Body Snatchers, I love. So if you guys ever do like an episode where you talk about maybe like the old school 56 one and the 78 one, and then maybe like the Faculty just as like a wild card, like you guys like to do the 3 movies, like I would love to join you guys on that, because I love Body Snatchers. So
I'll keep that in mind. I've been saying this a lot. The day me and you start, when we jump off, we become popular, that's when we'll start having guests. So maybe because you already kind of have a thing, but maybe I'll make an exception. Same thing with John, because me and him kind of have that role too, because we don't
you guys do your show. I'm enjoying it. I'm having fun with it. That's literally that's my most passionate horror topic or whatever. I love paranoia horror, and that's I dig it. I think if, like I said, you guys like to do the three movie format, which is like the 3 related movies. So if you do like the old school 50s Body Snatchers, the Donald Sutherland 78, and then to do like the Faculty, which is kind of like a more modern post Scream kind of Kevin Williamson take on Body Snatchers, I think that would be a cool 3-fer at some point. I just that'd be my only request, and then you guys do your show whenever like you do. But I'm enjoying watching it though, because I love horror. So any time talking horror, I'm in.
So that's that. And then we also do trivia on the channel, movie trivia. We have a league, and then we also an open format. So make sure you check out that stuff. And then debates randomly, I'll jump on that. If not, you can check out me and Austin both on Movie Battleground. It's at this point it's established. I'm the champ, so you can definitely watch.
Yay! Henry, he had to get through me to get to the title, and I want my rematch.
There you go. You got to earn it, buddy. But I'll give it to you.
I know. I'm gonna have a match very soon. I'm gonna destroy Papa West and wipe the floor with him and get my path to you. So I'm determined to clear my way and get to you, sir. So I have motivation.
That's what I like to hear. Other than that, what do you got up going on your other channel?
Movie Hero Network is the channel I run with Jordan Anderson. We do a wrestling podcast, so if you like wrestling, the Lonely Marks podcast, we were having fun with that. So that's on Thursday nights. Check that out. Moose Haas from the Schmodown, we're doing his top 64. So and the panel is going to be his family. It's like his brother and his cousin and his sister are all going to be on the panel, just with me and Jordan co-hosting. So that should be interesting. Have a cool panel, have his family just kind of roasting his 64. That'll be fun. We do tier ranker fights, tournament fights. We literally just did one on war movies last night. So we talked about Full Metal Jacket and Paths of Glory and Dr. Strangelove. A bunch of those came up. So, and I was like, oh, I get to talk literally 2 nights in a row, kind of coincidentally, talking about these movies. So go check those out. We have a good time over there. And I'll be doing a trivia match on Henry's channel very soon, a 3-way on Monday. We'll be taping that Monday night, so that'll be fun.
Absolutely. So with that said, shout out to you guys. It's a longer episode. Appreciate you guys' patience. Make sure you comment below your guys' Kubrick ranking. And if, like I said, if you just clicked on the channel randomly because you saw Kubrick and you're a fan, go ahead and subscribe, because we do more stuff like this. And
hey, the episode wasn't as long as Barry Lyndon. I mean, so that's something.
You're not wrong. You could almost watch this twice and see Barry Lyndon and then a little bit of Dr. Strangelove. But one thing, I had never said this either. Comment below any guys suggestions. Maybe we can kind of prioritize that if we get a popular demand, because we have over 100 things on the side list that we were deciding, what do we want to see? So Yeah, maybe if we have some suggestions in the comments, maybe we'll start. It'll make us easier to decide what we're gonna go. Because now we're gonna start getting into our random shit, so it's gonna be hard to pick which one we want to do.
That's gonna be fun.
So with that said, my name is Hedrick Confidential. So that's awesome, Pez Howell, and make sure you show up every Wednesday because this is where we rank stuff. Bye, guys.
Bye.